The stagecoach hit another rut, and Claire's head slammed against the wooden frame hard enough to rattle her teeth. She didn't cry out. Hadn't made a sound in 3 days, not since Kansas City, not since the lawyer with the tobacco-stained fingers had handed her the contract and told her this was the best offer she'd get. Sign here, Miss Whitmore. Initial there. Congratulations. You're going west. West. Like it was opportunity. Like it was freedom. The two other passengers, a merchant with a handlebar mustache and a woman in a green traveling suit, had stopped trying to make conversation somewhere around the Colorado line. Clara knew what they saw when they looked at her. A woman past her prime, plain-faced, with calloused hands, and a trunk that didn't even fill half the cargo space. A woman being shipped like dry goods because no man back east would have her. The merchant had made one attempt at civility. Family out in Wyoming territory? No. Business, then? Clara had met his eyes. You could call it that. He hadn't asked again. Now, as the coach lurched over another stone, the woman in green muttered something about those people under her breath, and Clara felt the familiar burn in her chest, the one that had lived there since her father's funeral, since the cousins had descended on the house like vultures, since they'd made it clear that an unmarried woman of 32 had no claim to anything. Not the house, not the shop, not even her own future. The contractual marriage broker had been efficient, clinical. We have a rancher in Wyoming, widower, needs help with the property. He'll pay your passage, provide room and board. You'll work the household, assist with livestock as needed. It's not a love match, Miss Whitmore, but it's honest work and a roof over your head. What's his name? Caleb Ward. Runs a cattle operation outside Red Hollow. Keeps to himself mostly. Lost his wife 2 years back. Why doesn't he just hire help? The broker had shifted in his seat. Mr. Ward's particular about his privacy. A wife provides certain legal protections. Stability. And frankly, Miss Whitmore, given your circumstances, I wouldn't advise being particular about the details. She'd signed the next morning. The stagecoach crested a hill, and Clara caught her first glimpse of Red Hollow through the dusty window. It wasn't a town so much as an argument against optimism, a collection of weathered buildings slumped against the Wyoming wind like they were too tired to stand up straight. Main Street was a strip of packed dirt flanked by a general store, a saloon, what looked like a church with a leaning steeple, and a handful of structures that could have been homes or storage sheds depending on how generous you wanted to be with the definition. Red Hollow, the driver called back. 10 minutes. The merchant gathered his belongings with visible relief. The woman in green didn't look at Clara at all. Clara smoothed her skirt. Dark gray wool, practical. The kind of dress that said she understood exactly what kind of life she was walking into. Her trunk contained 4 more just like it. 2 work aprons, a winter coat that had been her mother's, and a small wooden box with her mother's wedding ring inside. Not because she had any illusions about wearing it, because it was the only thing the cousins hadn't managed to steal. The coach rolled to a stop in front of the general store, and the driver climbed down to start unloading luggage. Clara stepped out into the Wyoming afternoon and immediately understood why they called it Red Hollow. The earth itself had a rust-colored tint, and the wind carried dust that coated everything in a fine orange grime. A small crowd had gathered, not welcoming, just watching. Clara recognized the look. She'd seen it back east, at her father's funeral, when the respectable families had come to assess what was left of the Whitmore estate. This was the same calculation, the same cold measuring. A woman in a blue calico dress stood near the store entrance, arms crossed. That her? Must be, someone else said. Lord, she's older than I thought. Clara kept her face neutral, reached for her trunk as the driver set it down. It was heavier than she could manage alone, but she'd be damned if she'd ask for help from this crowd. Mrs. Ward, I presume? The voice came from a tall man in a black coat, older, maybe 60, with the kind of smile that didn't reach anywhere near his eyes. I'm Mayor Hutchins. Welcome to Red Hollow. Miss Whitmore, Clara corrected. The marriage isn't official yet. Ah, technicalities. He gestured vaguely toward the edge of town. Mr. Ward's ranch is about 4 miles northwest. He doesn't come into town much. Sent word he'd collect you this afternoon. Collect, Clara repeated, like she was a package. Figure of speech. The mayor's smile widened. We don't get many new arrivals. You'll find Red Hollow a tight-knit community. We look after our own." The way he said it made it sound like a threat. Clara was trying to figure out how to respond when a younger woman, maybe 25, blonde, with a face that would have been pretty if it wasn't twisted into something ugly, stepped forward. "Is it true you're from a workhouse?" the blonde asked, loud enough for everyone to hear. Silence dropped over the crowd like a stone into water. Clara turned slowly. "No. That's not what I heard. Heard your family threw you out. Heard you had nowhere else to go." "Then you heard wrong." "Did I?" The blonde tilted her head. "Because the way I see it, a woman your age coming all the way out here to marry a man she's never met, that's not a woman with options. That's a woman who's desperate." Clara felt the old familiar anger rising, the kind that had gotten her into trouble back in Kansas City, the kind she'd spent years learning to swallow. But she was tired. Tired from 3 days in a stagecoach. Tired from a year of fighting cousins and lawyers and a system designed to grind women like her into dust. "You're right," Clara said evenly. "I didn't have options. And if that makes you feel superior, congratulations. You've successfully identified that my life has been hard. Would you like a medal?" The blonde's face flushed. You were just making sure everyone here knows I'm beneath you. Message received." Clara turned back to her trunk, grabbed the handle. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a husband to meet." She managed to drag the trunk maybe 6 feet before her arms gave out. The damn thing weighed as much as a small horse, and her hands were already blistering from the rough rope handle. No one moved to help. Clara straightened, wiped her palms on her skirt, and was preparing for another attempt when the sound of hoofbeats made everyone turn. The rider came in from the northwest, silhouetted against the afternoon sun. A big man on a bigger horse, moving with the kind of easy competence that said he'd been doing this his whole life. He didn't hurry, didn't seem to care that half the town was watching, just rode straight up to where Clara stood, dismounted, and took off his hat. Caleb Ward was not what she'd expected. The broker had said widower, said rancher, said keeps to himself. Had not mentioned that the man was built like he'd been carved out of the same red stone as the surrounding hills. Tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair that needed cutting, and a face that looked like it hadn't smiled in about a decade. He had to be 40, maybe older, with lines around his eyes that spoke to years of squinting into the sun and weather that didn't give a damn about comfort. He looked at Clara for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he nodded once. "Miss Whitmore, Mr. Ward. Your trunk?" "Yes." He bent, lifted it like it weighed nothing, and secured it to the back of his saddle. Then he turned back to Clara, and for the first time she saw something shift in his eyes. Not warmth exactly, but maybe acknowledgement. Like he was seeing her, actually seeing her, instead of just assessing her value. "Can you ride?" Clara hesitated. She'd been on a horse maybe twice in her life, both times as a child. "I can learn." Something that might have been amusement flickered across his face. "Good answer." He held out his hand. "Town's already made up its mind about you. Might as well give them something to talk about." Clara took his hand, calloused, strong, steadying, and let him help her onto the horse. She had to hitch her skirt up in a way that was absolutely improper, and she could feel the stairs burning into her back. The blonde from earlier called out, "Shame about your first wife, Caleb. Heard she couldn't handle ranch life either." Caleb's hand tightened on the reins, but his voice stayed level. "Careful, Lucy. Your father owes me $300 from last season. Be a shame if I had to collect early." Lucy's mouth snapped shut. Caleb swung up behind Clara, one arm coming around her waist to take the reins. It should have been terrifying, sitting on a moving animal with a stranger's arm around her, but somehow it wasn't. Maybe because Caleb Ward didn't feel like a stranger. He felt like someone who understood exactly what it meant to have a whole town against you. They rode out of Red Hollow in silence, and Clara didn't look back. The ranch appeared after about 40 minutes of riding through scrub brush and rocky terrain. Clara had expected something bigger, more established. What she got was a weathered house that looked like it had been built by someone who valued function over form, a barn that was listing slightly to one side, and a series of fences in various states of disrepair. "Not much to look at," Caleb said, helping her down. "But it's solid, most of it." Clara studied the house. 2 stories, wood frame, windows that needed washing but weren't broken. "I've seen worse." "Have you?" She turned to find him watching her with that same unreadable expression. Mr. Ward, I spent the last year living in 2 rooms above a millinery shop, taking in sewing to pay rent after my father died, and my cousins took everything else. Yes, I've seen worse. He nodded slowly. Broker told me you had a hard time, didn't mention the details. Would it have mattered? No. He grabbed her trunk, started toward the house. Contract's a contract. I need help running this place. You need a home. Rest is just details. Clara followed him up the porch steps, noticing the way several boards creaked ominously under their weight. How long have you been out here? 10 years. Built the house with my first wife, Elizabeth. He pushed open the door, set the trunk down in the entryway. She died 2 years ago. Fever. I'm sorry. Are you? He turned to face her, and his expression was harder now. Or is that just what you're supposed to say? Clara felt her spine straighten. I don't say things because I'm supposed to, Mr. Ward. I say them because I mean them. I'm sorry your wife died. I'm sorry you're in a position where you had to contract a stranger to help you run your ranch. And I'm sorry that we're both standing here pretending this is anything other than a business arrangement between 2 people who ran out of better options. For a long moment, Caleb just stared at her. Then, incredibly, one corner of his mouth twitched up. You always this blunt? Usually more. I've been trying to be polite. Don't. He moved past her into the kitchen, which was surprisingly clean for a bachelor household. I've had enough polite to last a lifetime. Town's full of people who smile to your face and put knives in your back soon as you turn around. You want to survive out here, Miss Whitmore. You tell the truth, even when it's ugly. Clara set her bag down, looked around the kitchen. Cast iron stove, solid table, shelves that held a surprisingly organized collection of dry goods. Why do they hate you? Excuse me? The town. That woman, Lucy, she wasn't just being cruel, she was enjoying it, like she had a reason. Caleb's jaw tightened. That's a long story. We have time. Do we? He crossed his arms, leaned against the counter. Way I see it, Miss Whitmore, we have a contract. You help me run this ranch, I provide room and board. We make it legal in front of a justice of the peace, and you get the protection of my name. What we don't have is friendship, understanding, whatever you want to call it. I'm not looking for someone to confide in. Clara felt the words land like stones. Understood. Good. He moved toward the door. I'll show you where you'll sleep. There's work to do before dark. She followed him up the narrow stairs to the 2nd floor. 3 doors, one open, revealing a bedroom that was clearly his, one closed, and one that he pushed open to reveal a small room with a bed, a dresser, and a window overlooking the barn. This was Elizabeth's sewing room, Caleb said. It's yours now. I'll bring your trunk up later. Clara stepped inside. The room was sparse but clean, with a quilt on the bed that looked handmade. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. He turned to leave, then paused. Dinner's at 6. I expect you to earn your keep, Miss Whitmore. This isn't a charity house. I wouldn't want it to be. He nodded, then disappeared down the hallway. Clara sat on the bed, feeling the exhaustion of the past 3 days finally catch up with her. The quilt smelled faintly of lavender, and she wondered if Elizabeth Ward had sat in this same spot, making this same quilt, with no idea that someday a stranger would be sleeping under it. The window offered a view of the ranch, the barn, the fences, the endless stretch of red earth beyond. It was harsh land, unforgiving, the kind of place that would break you if you let it. Clara stood, smoothed her skirt, and headed downstairs. If Caleb Ward thought she was going to break, he was in for a surprise. The next morning, Clara woke to the sound of roosters and the smell of coffee. She dressed quickly, work dress, apron, boots she'd bought specifically for this, and found Caleb already in the kitchen, standing at the stove. Coffee's ready, he said without turning around. Hope you can cook, because I can't. Clara poured herself a cup, took a sip. It was strong enough to strip paint. I can manage. What do you usually eat? Whatever doesn't kill me. He set a plate of something that might have been eggs on the table. Chickens are out back. We've got about 20 head of cattle in the north pasture, another 30 in the south. Fences need mending, barn needs mucking, and the well pump's been acting up. Clara sat down, studied the eggs. They were definitely eggs, possibly. Where do you want me to start? Kitchen. Get this place organized. Figure out what we need from town. I'll handle the livestock for now, but eventually you'll need to learn that too. All right. He looked at her like he was waiting for a complaint. When none came, he nodded. I'll be back around noon. Clara spent the morning learning the geography of the house. It was bigger than it looked from outside. Kitchen, sitting room, small study, and a back room that was clearly used for storage. Upstairs was the 2 bedrooms and Elizabeth's old sewing room. Everything was functional but showed signs of neglect. Dust in the corners, dishes that needed washing, windows that hadn't been cleaned in months. She started with the kitchen, washing every dish, scrubbing the counters, reorganizing the pantry. It was meditative work, the kind that let her mind wander while her hands stayed busy. By the time Caleb came back, she had bread rising and a pot of stew simmering on the stove. He stopped in the doorway, staring at the transformation. You did all this in one morning? I'm efficient. Clara wiped her hands on her apron. We need flour, salt, coffee, and sugar from town. Also, lamp oil and soap. I made a list. Caleb took the list, scanned it. I'll go Friday. Town day. I could come with you. Help carry? No. His tone was final. You stay here. Clara felt her temper spike. Mr. Ward, if we're going to work together, you can't just... I said no. He set the list on the table, his expression hard. The town already knows you're here. They don't need to see you again. Not yet. Why? Because they'll talk? Because they'll make your life hell. And I don't need that headache. He moved toward the door. Stay on the ranch, Miss Whitmore. It's safer. He was gone before she could argue. Clara stood in the kitchen, hands clenched into fists, feeling the familiar burn of being told what to do for her own good. She'd spent a year dealing with cousins who'd used the same logic. Stay quiet, don't make waves, accept your place. She hadn't come all the way to Wyoming to accept anything. Quote, the pattern established itself over the next 2 weeks. Caleb would wake before dawn, handle the livestock, come back for meals that Clara prepared, then disappear until dark. They barely spoke beyond logistics. Fence broke in the south pasture, need more firewood, well pumps acting up again. Clara threw herself into the work. She cleaned every room in the house, mended clothes, organized the storage room, learned to bake bread in the temperamental oven. She also started watching Caleb from the kitchen window, learning the rhythm of ranch work, how he moved the cattle, fixed fences, handled the horses. On the 10th day, she followed him out to the barn. What are you doing? Caleb asked, looking up from the saddle he was repairing. Learning. I said I'd handle the livestock. And I said I can learn. Clara crossed her arms. You can either teach me or I can figure it out myself and probably screw something up. Your choice. Caleb studied her for a long moment. You ever worked with cattle before? No? Horses? Barely. Then you start with chickens. He stood, gestured toward the coop. They're mean, stupid, and they'll peck your hands bloody if you're not careful. But if you can handle them, we'll talk about the rest. Clara spent the next hour learning that chickens were, in fact, exactly as mean and stupid as advertised. She collected eggs with bleeding knuckles and a healthy respect for anything with a beak. Caleb watched from the barn door, arms crossed. Still want to learn? Yes. Why? Clara wiped blood off her hand. Because if something happens to you, I need to know how to keep this place running. Because I'm not going to sit in that house and pretend I'm useful when I could actually be useful. And because I didn't come all this way to be decorative. Something shifted in Caleb's expression. You're stubborn. You're just figuring that out? He almost smiled. Come on, I'll show you how to muck stalls. 3 weeks after Clara arrived, Caleb came back from town with supplies and a tight expression that said something had gone wrong. What happened? Clara asked, helping him unload. Nothing. Mr. Ward, Caleb. He set a sack of flour down harder than necessary. If we're married, you should probably use my name. They'd made it official the week before. a 5-minute ceremony in front of a justice of the peace who'd clearly done it as a favor to Caleb and spent the entire time looking at Clara like she was something unfortunate. No witnesses, no celebration, just signatures on paper. All right, Caleb, Clara tried the name out. What happened in town? He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, Hutchins made me an offer on the ranch. The mayor? Him and a couple others. They've been trying to buy me out for 2 years. He started putting supplies away with sharp, angry movements. Said with Elizabeth gone, there's no point in me trying to hold on to this place. Said a woman like you, his words, wouldn't last a season. And then what would I do? Clara felt ice slide down her spine. What did you tell him? That the ranch isn't for sale. That my wife is stronger than he thinks, and that he can go to hell. That must have gone over well. Caleb's laugh was bitter. About as well as you'd expect. He reminded me that I owe money at the bank. That winter's coming. That cattle prices are down and my credit's running thin. He slammed a cabinet shut. Same threats he's been making for 2 years. Why does he want this land so badly? Water. Caleb gestured toward the west. Creek that runs through my property feeds into the river. Controls the creek, you control water access for half the ranches in the area. Hutchins and his partners have been buying up land, trying to monopolize the water supply. My ranch is the last holdout. Clara processed this. So he's been trying to force you out. For 2 years, Elizabeth's death, that was just convenient timing for him. The way he said it made Clara look up sharply. You don't think... I don't think anything. But his eyes said different. Elizabeth got sick, fever. Doctor said it was just bad luck. But the timing... He shook his head. Doesn't matter now. Clara thought about the town's hostility, the way people had looked at her, the casual cruelty from Lucy and the others. They're all in on it, the whole town. Most of them. Hutchins owns the bank, the saloon, the general store. You don't cross him if you want to keep doing business. Caleb met her eyes. That's why I told you to stay out of town. The less they see you, the less ammunition they have. Ammunition for what? For proving you're not fit to be here. That I made a mistake bringing you. That the ranch is failing and I should just sell. He moved closer, and Clara could see the exhaustion in his face. They're watching Clara, looking for any excuse to say this isn't working. And if they get enough people to believe it, they can pressure the bank, call in my loans, force a sale. Clara understood now. She wasn't just a housekeeper or a ranch hand. She was a piece in a larger game, and the stakes were higher than she'd realized. Then we don't give them an excuse, she said quietly. Caleb studied her. You're not what I expected. Good or bad? Haven't decided yet. Said. The weather turned cold in early October. Clara woke one morning to frost on the windows, and Caleb already gone, out checking on cattle that had strayed during the night. She made breakfast, fed the chickens, started on the day's bread. The routine had become comfortable, familiar. She'd learned the rhythm of the ranch, learned how to work alongside Caleb without getting in his way, learned that he liked his coffee black and his silence respected. But she'd also learned that silence could be dangerous. Caleb came back around noon, and Clara knew immediately something was wrong. His face was set in hard lines, and he was moving with the kind of controlled anger that said he was close to breaking something. What happened? Fence was cut, north pasture, lost 6 head of cattle. Clara froze. Cut? Not broken? Clean cuts, 3 places. Whoever did it knew what they were doing. He poured himself coffee with shaking hands. They wanted the cattle to wander, probably drove them off after dark. Hutchins? Can't prove it, but yeah. He drank the coffee in one long swallow. That's $1,200 I can't afford to lose. Bank payments due in 3 weeks, and I'm already short. Clara's mind raced. What if we found the cattle? They could be anywhere by now, sold, slaughtered halfway to Colorado. Caleb set the cup down. It's done. So what do we do? He looked at her, and for the first time she saw something like defeat in his eyes. I don't know. Clara had seen that look before, on her father's face, in the weeks before he died, when the debts had piled up and the creditors had started circling. She'd watched a strong man crumble under the weight of impossible choices. She wasn't going to watch it happen again. We fight, she said. Clara. No. She moved closer. You said this town will look for any excuse to say we're failing, so we don't let them see us fail. We find a way to make that bank payment, we fix the fences, and we make it clear that we're not going anywhere. With what money? Clara hesitated, then made a decision. I have some. Not much, but I'm not taking your money. It's not about taking, it's about surviving. She met his eyes. We're in this together now, Caleb. Whether you like it or not. Your debts are my debts. Your fight is my fight, so either we figure this out together or we both lose. He stared at her for a long moment. Then slowly, he nodded. How much do you have? $200. It's all I managed to hide before my cousins took everything else. That's not enough. Bank wants $500 by month's end. Claire's heart sank, but she kept her voice steady. Then we find another $300. Sell something. Take on work. Whatever it takes. Oh, Caleb laughed, but there was no humor in it. You really are stubborn. You keep saying that like it's a bad thing. Maybe it's not. He stood, grabbed his coat. I'll ride into town tomorrow. See if anyone needs work done. He paused. You should come with me. Clara blinked. I thought you said... I know what I said, but if we're doing this, if we're really fighting back, they need to see you. See us together. See that you're not going anywhere. His expression was grim. It won't be pleasant. I didn't come here for pleasant. No, Caleb said quietly. I don't suppose you did. They rode into Red Hollow on a cold Thursday morning, and Clara felt the stares before they even reached Main Street. People stopped what they were doing to watch. Women on the boardwalk, men outside the saloon, children playing in the dirt. Caleb helped Clara down from the horse, his hand steady on her elbow. Stay close, he murmured. Don't let them see they're getting to you. Clara nodded, straightened her spine, and followed him toward the general store. They made it about 10 feet before Lucy appeared, flanked by 2 other women. Well, well, Lucy said, loud enough for half the street to hear. The happy couple. How's married life, Mrs. Ward? Clara met her eyes. Productive. I bet. Lucy's gaze swept over Clara's worn dress, her work-roughened hands. Heard you've been doing actual ranch work. That must be, humbling. Honest work isn't humbling, Clara said evenly. It's honest. One of Lucy's companions giggled. Heard Caleb lost some cattle. Shame about that. Almost like someone's trying to tell him something. Caleb's hand tightened on Clara's arm, but his voice stayed level. Almost like someone's a thief. But I'm sure the sheriff will get to the bottom of it. Sheriff's awful busy, Lucy said. Don't know if he'll have time for every little problem out at your ranch. The threat was clear. Clara felt rage building in her chest. The same rage that had gotten her thrown out of her cousin's house. The same rage that had made her sign a contract to marry a stranger rather than accept charity. But she also remembered what Caleb had said. The town was watching, looking for excuses. So instead of shouting, instead of letting Lucy see her anger, Clara smiled. You know, Lucy, I've been wondering something. Oh? Why do you care so much about my marriage, about our ranch, about whether I last a season? Clara tilted her head. It's almost like you have some kind of personal interest in Caleb, or maybe in his land. Which is it? Lucy's face flushed red. I don't know what you're... Because from where I'm standing, a woman who spends this much energy trying to make another woman's life miserable usually has a reason. Either she wanted what that woman has, or someone's paying her to be cruel. So which is it, Lucy? Are you jealous, or are you just cheap? The street had gone silent. Lucy's mouth opened and closed like a fish. You can't talk to me like that. I just did. Clara turned to Caleb. Shall we get those supplies? Caleb's expression was carefully neutral, but Clara could have sworn she saw approval in his eyes. After you. They walked into the general store, leaving Lucy sputtering on the boardwalk. Inside, the store owner, a thin man with nervous eyes, greeted them with obvious reluctance. Caleb, Mrs. Ward. Morning, Jensen, Caleb said. Need to put in an order. Jensen glanced toward the window where Lucy and her friends were still visible. I'm not sure I can extend more credit right now, Caleb. With the bank situation and all, I'm paying cash. Caleb set $200 on the counter. Clara's money, though he didn't say it. That should cover this month and next. Unless you have a problem with my money? Jensen stared at the bills like they might bite him. No, no problem. They left the store 20 minutes later with supplies and the certainty that the whole town would know about the cash by nightfall. Caleb was quiet as they loaded the wagon, his jaw tight. You shouldn't have done that, he said finally. Done what? Stood up to Lucy like that. You'll make enemies. Clara climbed onto the wagon seat. I already have enemies, Caleb. Might as well earn them honestly. He looked at her for a long moment, then climbed up beside her. You're going to fit in here just fine. Is that good or bad? Haven't decided yet. But this time, when he said it, he was almost smiling. They were halfway back to the ranch when Clara saw the riders. 4 men, coming from the east, moving fast. Caleb saw them too, and immediately steered the wagon off the main path, heading for a stand of trees. Who are they? Clara asked. Don't know, but anyone riding that hard out here usually means trouble. He pulled the wagon behind the trees, his hand moving to the rifle under the seat. Stay quiet. The riders passed close enough that Clara could see their faces. Hard men, weathered, with the look of hired muscle. They were heading toward the ranch. When they were out of sight, Caleb urged the horses forward, faster now. We need to get back. They reached the ranch to find the front door kicked in and the house ransacked. Not destroyed, just searched, roughly, like someone had been looking for something specific. Caleb moved through the rooms with the rifle ready, but the riders were gone. Clara stood in the kitchen, looking at overturned drawers and scattered supplies, feeling violation settle into her bones. What were they looking for? She asked. Proof. Caleb's voice was hard. Proof that we're failing, that I can't make payments, that you're not really my wife. He picked up an overturned chair. Hutchins is getting desperate. Clara knelt to gather scattered papers. Among them was the marriage certificate, ripped but still intact. She smoothed it carefully. He won't find anything. He'll make something up if he has to. Caleb set the chair down. That's how men like him work. They don't need truth, just enough doubt to get what they want. Clara stood, the certificate in her hands. Then we give them something they can't doubt. Like what? She met his eyes. We make them watch us win. Caleb stared at her, and something shifted in his expression, recognition, maybe, or respect. You really believe we can beat them? I believe we don't have a choice. Clara moved to the window, looking out at the ranch, the barn, the fences, the land Caleb had fought for. This is our home now, Caleb. Yours and mine. And I'm not letting anyone take it. Outside, the wind picked up, carrying dust across the red earth. Winter was coming, and with it, the real fight. But for the first time since she'd arrived in Red Hollow, Clara wasn't afraid. She was angry, and anger, she'd learned, was so much more useful than fear. Clara spent the next 3 days fixing what the riders had broken. Not just the physical damage, overturned furniture, scattered supplies, the kicked-in door that now hung crooked on its hinges. She fixed the violation itself, scrubbing every surface until her hands cracked and bled, reorganizing every drawer, putting everything back exactly where it belonged, as if order could erase the feeling of strange hands rifling through her things. Caleb watched her from the doorway on the second day, leaning against the frame with his arms crossed. You don't have to do this all at once. Yes, I do. Clara didn't look up from the cabinet she was reorganizing. They came into our home. They touched our things. I need it clean. He was quiet for a moment. Elizabeth used to do the same thing. After someone broke in the first time, Clara's hand stilled. The first time? 2 years ago, right after we refused Hutchins' first offer. Caleb's voice was flat, but Clara could hear the anger underneath. They didn't take anything that time either. Just wanted us to know they could get in whenever they wanted. Did you report it to the sheriff? Caleb's laugh was bitter. Sheriff works for Hutchins. Far as the law is concerned, nothing happened here. Clara turned to face him. How many times? 3, not counting this one. He pushed off from the doorframe. Elizabeth started sleeping with a knife under her pillow after the second time. Not that it would have helped. The words landed heavy between them. Clara thought about the fever that had killed Elizabeth Ward, the convenient timing, the way Caleb's jaw tightened whenever her name came up. You think they did something to her? I think a healthy woman doesn't just get sick and die in 3 days. Caleb's eyes were hard. I think the doctor who treated her left town the week after she died. And I think Hutchins made me another offer at her funeral. Clara felt ice slide through her veins. That's unprovable. Yeah. He moved toward the door. Which is why I'm not saying it out loud. And why you need to be careful, Clara. These people don't play fair. He left before she could respond. Clara stood in the kitchen, holding a coffee tin in her shaking hands, understanding for the first time exactly how dangerous this situation was. She'd thought it was about money, about land and water rights and business. But if Caleb was right, if Elizabeth hadn't just died of fever, then this was about something darker. She set the tin down carefully, walked to the window and looked out at the ranch. The barn needed new boards on the north side. The chicken coop was held together mostly by hope and rusty nails. The fences Caleb had spent weeks repairing were already showing strain from the cattle pressing against them. It was a lot of work for a dying ranch, a lot of effort for something that might not survive the winter. But Clara had learned something in the year after her father died, when the cousins had circled and the lawyers had sharpened their knives. Sometimes survival wasn't about having the best hand. It was about refusing to fold. She went back to cleaning. That night, Clara made venison stew from the deer Caleb had shot 2 days earlier. She'd never cooked game before coming to Wyoming, had barely known how to cook anything beyond basic staples, but necessity was teaching her fast. The meat was tough, the vegetables slightly overcooked, but it was hot and filling, and Caleb ate 2 bowls without complaint. "We need to talk about money," Clara said, setting her spoon down. "Real talk. How bad is it?" Caleb wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. "Bank wants $500 by the end of the month. I've got maybe $200 in cash after buying those supplies. Can't sell cattle because we just lost 6 head and prices are terrible right now. Can't sell land because that's what Hutchins wants. What about work? You said you'd look for jobs in town." "Yeah, I asked around. Nothing available. Or nothing they're willing to give me, which amounts to the same thing." He pushed his bowl away. "Hutchins has made sure everyone knows I'm a bad investment." Clara did the math in her head. "So we're 300 short with 3 weeks to find it. Give or take. What happens if we can't pay?" Caleb met her eyes. "Bank forecloses. Hutchins buys the land at auction for pennies on the dollar. We lose everything. And then? Then you're a widow before you've been a wife for 2 months, because I'll probably do something stupid that gets me killed." He said it like a joke, but Clara heard the truth underneath. She'd seen that look before, on her father's face, the night before he died. The look of a man who'd run out of options and was starting to think about final solutions. "No," she said firmly. "No what? No, you don't get to give up. No, you don't get to do something stupid. And no, we're not losing this ranch." Clara stood, started gathering dishes. "We find another way." Clara, I mean it, Caleb. I didn't come all the way out here to watch you throw your life away because some bastard wants your land. We find another way." He stared at her for a long moment. "You got any brilliant ideas?" Clara paused, dish in hand, thinking. Then slowly, carefully, she said, "My father left me more than $200. You said that was all I managed to hide, yes. But there's more. About $800 in a trust that my cousins couldn't touch because my mother set it up before she died. It's still sitting in a bank in Kansas City." Caleb's expression went carefully blank. "Why didn't you mention this before?" "Because I was saving it. For emergencies, for—" She trailed off, realizing how stupid it sounded now. "I don't know. Something worse than this, I guess." "Well, worse than losing your home and possibly getting killed by corrupt ranchers?" Caleb's voice was sharp. "What exactly were you saving it for, Clara?" She set the dish down with a clatter. "I was saving it because it's the only thing I have left of my mother, because once it's gone, that's it. No safety net, no backup plan, just nothing. You could have mentioned it when I told you we were 300 short. And you could have mentioned that your first wife might have been murdered." Clara shot back. "We're both keeping secrets, Caleb. Don't act like I'm the only one." The silence that followed was thick enough to cut. Finally, Caleb stood. "How long would it take to get the money?" "I'd have to write to the bank. Maybe 3 weeks? 4? Bank payments due in 3. Then I send a telegram, pay extra for a wire transfer." Clara crossed her arms. "It'll cost more, but we'll have the money in a week." Caleb looked at her like he was trying to figure out a puzzle. "Why would you do that? It's your money." Your inheritance. You could use it to leave here, get away from all this. And go where? Back to Kansas City, where my cousins are waiting to finish picking my bones clean? To another town where I'm just another desperate woman with no options? Clara moved closer. I'm here, Caleb. For better or worse. And yeah, I know, we said those words in front of a judge who barely looked at us, but they still mean something. This is my home now. That makes it worth fighting for. He was quiet for so long, Clara thought he wouldn't respond. Then, I can't pay you back. I'm not asking you to. But when this is over, if we make it through winter, you can teach me to rope cattle and shoot straight. That's payment enough. Clara managed a small smile. Besides, what else am I going to spend it on? New dresses? The town already hates me. Might as well hate me in the same 5 dresses I've been wearing. Caleb almost smiled. Almost. You're either the bravest woman I've ever met or the craziest. Can it be both? This time he did smile, brief and startling. Yeah, I guess it can. The next morning they rode to town together. Clara wore her best dress, still worn, still plain, but clean and pressed, and kept her spine straight as they passed the stairs in whispers. The telegraph office was a cramped room attached to the post office, run by a nervous man named Porter, who kept glancing at the door like he expected trouble to walk through it. Need to send a wire to Kansas City, Clara said, sliding her carefully written message across the counter, and arrange a transfer to the bank here. Porter read the message, and his eyebrows shot up. This is a lot of money, Mrs. Ward. Is that a problem? No, ma'am. Just unexpected. He counted out the fee. Transfer should arrive in 5 to 7 days, depending on processing time in Kansas City. Clara paid, watched Porter send the telegram, and felt something loosen in her chest. It was done. The safety net was gone, burned to buy them time. No going back now. They were leaving the post office when Mayor Hutchins appeared, flanked by 2 men Clara didn't recognize. He was smiling, but it didn't reach his eyes. Caleb, Mrs. Ward, lovely day. Hutchins. Caleb's voice was flat. Something you need? Just making friendly conversation. Heard you were in town. Hutchins' gaze slid to Clara. Sending telegrams? Hope it's not bad news from home. Clara felt Caleb tense beside her. She put a hand on his arm, gentle but firm. Just business, Mayor. Nothing that concerns you. Everything in this town concerns me, Mrs. Ward, especially when it involves one of our more troubled residents. He turned his smile on Caleb. Speaking of which, I understand your bank payment is coming due soon. How are preparations going? Fine. Really? Because I heard you lost some cattle last week. Terrible thing, cattle wandering off like that. Almost makes a man think someone should invest in better fences. Better security. Hutchins paused. Better decisions. Clara felt her temper rising, but Caleb's hand covered hers, squeezing once in warning. We'll manage, Caleb said evenly. Will you? Because the bank's been asking questions about your ability to pay, about whether it's responsible to keep extending credit to a failing ranch. Hutchins' smile widened. Just thought you should know, as a friend. We're not friends, Clara said before she could stop herself. Hutchins turned that smile on her, and it was colder than the Wyoming wind. No, Mrs. Ward, we're not. But we could be if you were smart. If you convinced your husband to take the very generous offer I've made. Otherwise, he shrugged. Well, winter's hard out here, especially for people who don't have friends. Is that a threat? Caleb's voice had gone quiet, dangerous. It's a fact. Hutchins tipped his hat. Enjoy the rest of your day. He walked away, his men following, leaving Clara and Caleb standing in the street. I want to hit him, Clara said quietly. Join the club. No, I mean really hit him. With something heavy. Caleb's mouth twitched. Also joining the club. They climbed onto the wagon in silence. Clara's hands were shaking, and she gripped her skirt to hide it. The money would arrive in a week. They'd make the payment. They'd survive this round. But Hutchins' words echoed in her head. Winter's hard out here. Caleb, she said as they left town, what happens after we make this payment? What do you mean? I mean, we pay the bank. We buy ourselves another month, maybe 2. But Hutchins isn't going to stop. He'll find another way to squeeze us. Cut more fences, steal more cattle, turn more people against us. Clara looked at him. When does it end? Caleb was quiet for a long time. I don't know. That's not good enough. It's the truth. He urged the horses faster. I've been fighting Hutchins for 2 years, Clara. Every time I think I've got ahead of him, he finds a new angle. New pressure. He's got money, connections, the whole damn town on his side. What am I supposed to do? Challenge him to a duel? Maybe you're fighting the wrong fight. Meaning, Clara turned to face him fully. You've been playing defense, protecting what you have, trying to survive. But maybe that's the problem. Maybe we need to go on offense. And do what? I can't outspend him, can't outbribe him. Hell, I can barely keep my own ranch running. So we don't fight with money, we fight with something else. Clara's mind was racing now, pieces clicking together. Hutchins wants this ranch because of water rights, because controlling the creek gives him leverage over other ranchers, right? Yeah. So what if we give them another option? What if we make sure the other ranchers know they don't have to go through Hutchins to get water? Caleb frowned. I'm not following. Your creek feeds the river. Hutchins wants to control access to both, but right now you're the only one with guaranteed access to the creek. What if you shared that access? Formalized it? Made agreements with the other ranchers that they can use the creek in exchange for, I don't know, support, protection. A united front against Hutchins? Caleb stared at her. You want me to negotiate water rights with people who hate me? I want you to give them a reason not to hate you. Right now, they side with Hutchins because it's safer. Because going against him means losing access to water, to credit, to everything they need to survive. But if you offer them an alternative, if you make it clear that working with you is better than working with him, they'll still choose Hutchins. He's got too much power. Does he? Clara challenged. Or does he just have power because everyone's too scared to stand up to him? Because they think they're alone? Caleb pulled the wagon to a stop, turned to face her fully. This isn't some fairy story, Clara. People don't suddenly grow spines because someone makes a nice speech. They do what's safest for their families. I know that, but right now, Hutchins is making them think he's the only option. What if he's not? Clara leaned forward. What if there's a better way and we're the ones who offer it? And if it doesn't work? If they just tell Hutchins everything and he uses it against us? Then we're no worse off than we are now. Clara met his eyes. We're already losing, Caleb. Slowly, maybe, but losing. At least this way we're doing something instead of just waiting for him to tighten the noose. The wind picked up, carrying dust across the road. Somewhere in the distance, a hawk called. Caleb studied Clara's face like he was seeing her for the first time. You really think this could work? I think it's better than sitting around waiting to die. He laughed, sharp and surprised. You know, when the broker told me he had a woman willing to come out here, I figured I was getting someone desperate enough to tolerate me. Didn't think I'd get a strategist. Life's full of surprises. Clearly. He picked up the reins again. All right, say I agree to this. How do we even start? I can't exactly call a meeting of ranchers who think I'm bad luck. Clara thought for a moment. We start small. One rancher, someone who might be sympathetic, someone who's also struggling under Hutchins' thumb. That's most of them. But sympathetic? Caleb shook his head. The only one who might listen is Tom Brennan, and that's only because he's too stubborn to admit when he's beaten. Tell me about him. Runs a small operation about 10 miles south. Good man, mostly. Lost his son last year to pneumonia. Wife's sick now. He's drowning in debt, same as me, but he won't sell because the land's been in his family for 20 years. Caleb paused. Hutchins has been pressuring him hard, threatening to foreclose if he doesn't sell. So he's desperate. Desperate and angry, which makes him unpredictable. Clara nodded slowly. When can we talk to him? Clara, I just said he's unpredictable, which means he might actually listen, because he's got nothing left to lose. Clara looked at Caleb. We're running out of time. We need allies, and desperate, angry men make better allies than comfortable ones. Caleb was quiet for a long moment. Then he sighed. You're going to get us both killed. Maybe, but at least we'll go down fighting. That's not as comforting as you think it is. But he turned the wagon south. Brennan's place is about an hour's ride. We can make it before dark if we hurry. They rode in silence, Clara's mind churning through possibilities. She'd never done anything like this before, never negotiated, never tried to build alliances, never played politics. Back in Kansas City, she'd been the invisible daughter, the one who kept her head down and her mouth shut because making waves only made things worse. But Wyoming wasn't Kansas City. And Clara was learning that sometimes the only way to survive was to make the biggest waves possible. Tom Brennan's ranch made Caleb's place look prosperous. The house was smaller, the barn was actively collapsing on one side, and the fences were more hope than structure. A thin woman was hanging laundry despite the cold, her face gaunt and lined with exhaustion. She saw them coming and immediately went inside, shutting the door hard. "That's Sarah Brennan," Caleb said quietly. "She's not fond of visitors. Can you blame her?" They'd barely stopped the wagon when Tom Brennan emerged from the barn, rifle in hand. He was a big man, maybe 50, with the kind of weathered face that came from years of hard work and harder choices. He didn't point the rifle at them, but he didn't set it down either. "Caleb Ward, what the hell do you want?" Caleb held up his hands, open and empty. "Just to talk, Tom." "About what? You come to gloat?" "Because I'm about 2 weeks from losing everything, and I'm not in the mood for social calls." "We're here to help," Clara said, climbing down from the wagon, before Caleb could stop her. Tom's eyes shifted to her, narrowed. "You're the new wife." "Heard about you. Heard you're as crazy as he is." "I've been called worse." Clara walked forward, ignoring Caleb's hiss of warning. "Mr. Brennan, my husband tells me you're in the same situation we are. Debt. Pressure from Hutchins, no good options. Is that true?" Tom's jaw worked. "What's it to you?" "It means we might be able to help each other." "How? By pooling our nothing? I've got about as much money as I've got sympathy for Caleb Ward, which is to say, none." Clara didn't flinch. "What if I told you there was a way to keep your ranch, keep your water access, and tell Hutchins to go to hell, all without money?" Tom barked out a laugh. "Lady, I don't know what kind of fairy tales you've been reading, but I'm not talking about fairy tales. I'm talking about leverage." Clara crossed her arms. "Hutchins has power because he controls access to resources, water, credit, supplies. But Caleb's ranch has creek access that could serve half the ranches in this area. What if that access was formalized, shared? What if there was an alternative to Hutchins' monopoly?" Tom's expression shifted, hardened. "You're talking about making deals. Agreements. I'm talking about survival. Hutchins would never allow it. Hutchins doesn't have to allow anything if enough people stand together." Clara took another step forward. "Right now, everyone's alone. Everyone thinks they have to go through Hutchins because there's no other choice. But what if there was? What if every rancher who's drowning could band together, share resources, support each other? Hutchins can't crush all of you at once." Tom was quiet for a long moment. Then he set the rifle down, leaning it against the barn wall. "You know what happened to the last person who tried to organize against Hutchins?" "What?" "He had a barn fire. Lost everything. Couldn't prove it was arson, but everyone knew." Tom looked at Clara, and his eyes were tired. "You're talking about painting a target on your back, Mrs. Ward, on all our backs." "We already have targets on our backs," Clara said quietly. "At least this way we're shooting back." Tom looked at Caleb. "This your idea?" "Hers," Caleb said. "But I'm listening." "Why? You've been fighting Hutchins for 2 years on your own. Why change strategy now?" Caleb's jaw tightened. "Because I'm tired of losing, and because my wife makes a good point. Alone, we're all just waiting to be picked off, together. Maybe we've got a chance." Sarah Brennan appeared in the doorway, wrapped in a shawl despite the afternoon sun. She looked at Clara with sharp, assessing eyes. "You really believe this could work?" Clara turned to face her. "I believe doing nothing guarantees we lose. This at least gives us a fighting chance." Sarah was quiet for a moment. Then she looked at her husband. "Tom, we've got 2 weeks before the bank forecloses. We've got nothing left to lose." "We could lose more than the ranch," Tom said, but his voice had softened. "We're already losing me." Sarah's voice was matter-of-fact. "Doctor says I've got maybe 6 months. You want to spend those 6 months watching Hutchins take everything we built? Or you want to spend them fighting?" The silence that followed was heavy with grief and resignation, and something that might have been hope. Finally, Tom turned back to Claire and Caleb. What exactly are you proposing? Clara felt her heart rate kick up. A meeting. All the ranchers who are struggling. We lay it out. Shared water access, mutual support, maybe even pooled resources for supplies and labor. We show them there's another way. And when Hutchins finds out, because he will find out. Let him, Clara said, more confidently than she felt. Let him see that he doesn't control everything, that people have choices. Tom rubbed his face with both hands. This is insane. Probably, Caleb agreed. But it's the best insane plan we've got. Tom looked at his wife. Sarah nodded, once. All right, Tom said slowly. I'll help you set up a meeting, but I'm not promising anything beyond that. And if this goes sideways, if Hutchins comes after us, I'm out. I won't sacrifice my wife's last months for a plan that might not work. Fair enough, Claire said. When can we meet? Next week. There's a barn about 15 miles east, abandoned property. Neutral ground. I can get word to maybe a dozen ranchers who might be willing to listen. Tom's expression was grim. But Clara, Mrs. Ward, you better be ready to sell this, because you'll only get one shot. They left Brennan's ranch as the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. Caleb was quiet, his hands tight on the reins. You know this could backfire spectacularly, he said finally. I know. Hutchins could find out, could use it against us, could hurt people. I know that too. And you're still sure? Clara thought about Elizabeth Ward dead at 40, about Sarah Brennan dying slowly while her husband watched everything they'd built crumble, about the raiders breaking into her home, the casual cruelty of Lucy and her friends, the cold calculation in Hutchins' eyes. I'm sure, she said, because the alternative is just letting them win, and I'm done with that. Caleb was quiet for another mile. Then, Elizabeth would have liked you. Clara looked at him, startled. She was a fighter too, Caleb continued, his voice rough. Didn't back down from anyone. When things got hard, she got harder. I think, he paused, I think she would have appreciated what you're trying to do here. I'm sorry you lost her. Yeah, me too. Caleb's hands flexed on the reins. But I'm glad you're here, even if you're completely insane. Clara smiled despite herself. That's the nicest thing you've said to me. Don't let it go to your head. They rode the rest of the way home in companionable silence. And when they reached the ranch, Clara noticed Caleb didn't immediately head to the barn like usual. Instead, he helped her down from the wagon, his hand lingering on her arm for just a moment longer than necessary. Thank you, he said quietly, for the money, for this plan, for staying. Clara met his eyes. Where else would I go? Anywhere. You could have taken that inheritance and run, started over somewhere Hutchins and his people would never find you, and leave you here alone, fighting the same fight that killed your first wife? Clara shook her head. Not a chance. Something shifted in Caleb's expression. Surprise, maybe, or gratitude, or something Clara didn't have a name for. For a moment, she thought he might say something else, something important. Instead, he just nodded. I'll put the horses away. You should get inside. It's getting cold. Clara watched him lead the horses toward the barn, his shoulders set in determined lines. Then she went into the house that was slowly, impossibly, starting to feel like home. The money arrived 6 days later. Clara watched Porter count it out with shaking hands, clearly terrified by the amount. She signed the papers, arranged the transfer to Caleb's account, and walked out of the bank with her head high. Hutchins was waiting on the street outside. Mrs. Ward, heard you came into some money. News travels fast. It does in a small town. He fell into step beside her, and Clara fought the urge to walk faster. Interesting timing, right before your husband's payment is due. Lucky timing, Clara corrected. Perhaps. Hutchins' smile was thin. Of course, one payment doesn't solve all problems. There's still winter to get through, still next month's payment, still the question of whether your husband's ranch is actually viable in the long term. Clara stopped, turned to face him fully. Why do you care so much, Mayor? It's just one ranch. One failing ranch, according to you. Why waste your energy? Hutchins' eyes went cold. Principal, Mrs. Ward, I don't like being told no, And your husband has made a habit of it. So this is about ego. This is about order, about respecting the way things work in this town. He stepped closer, and Clara had to force herself not to back away. You're new here. You don't understand the history. Caleb Ward has been a problem for a long time. Making trouble, refusing reasonable offers, stirring up discontent. It's bad for business. He's surviving. That's not the same as making trouble. Isn't it? Hutchins tilted his head. Be careful, Mrs. Ward. You're tying yourself to a sinking ship, and when it goes down, you'll go with it. Then I guess I better learn to swim. She walked away before he could respond, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. But she didn't let him see her fear. Didn't let him see anything except the straight line of her back and the steady pace of her steps. When she got back to the ranch, Caleb was in the barn, repairing tack. She told him about the money, about the bank, about Hutchins. He's getting worried, Caleb said when she finished. That's why he confronted you. He knows the payment's going through and he's trying to rattle us. It's working. Good. Means we're doing something right. Caleb set down the leather he'd been working on. Meetings tomorrow night. Brennan got word to 11 ranchers. Most are cautious, but they're coming. 11. That's more than I expected. It's enough to start, if we can convince them. Caleb looked at her. You ready for this? Clara thought about the trust fund, gone, about Hutchins' threat, about Sarah Brennan's 6 months to live and Tom's desperate eyes, about the home she and Caleb were building in the ruins of his old life. Ready as I'll ever be. Tomorrow night, they'd find out if desperation was enough to build an alliance, if courage could be contagious, if a woman nobody wanted and a man nobody trusted could convince an entire community to fight back. Clara had no idea if it would work, but she knew, with absolute certainty, that she had to try. The abandoned barn sat in a hollow between two hills, far enough from any working ranch that sound wouldn't carry. Clara and Caleb arrived an hour before the meeting, and the silence felt heavier than it should have. The barn itself was missing half its roof, and the wind whistled through gaps in the walls like something dying. Cheerful place, Clara said, climbing down from the wagon. Belonged to the Mathers family. They sold to Hutchins 3 years ago after their well dried up. Caleb tied off the horses. He never did anything with the land, just wanted them gone. Clara looked at the skeletal building, imagining a family's dreams rotting into the ground. How many families has he done this to? Enough that people are scared to be the next one. They set up inside what remained of the barn, arranging hay bales in a rough circle. Claire had brought lanterns from the ranch, and Caleb hung them from the beams that were still standing. The light pushed back the darkness, but made the shadows deeper, stranger. What if they don't come? Clara asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Then we tried. Caleb checked the position of the last lantern. That's more than most people do. That's not comforting. No, but it's true. They heard the first horses around 7. Tom Brennan arrived with 2 other men Clara didn't recognize, all of them looking around like they expected ambush. Then more came, in 1s and 2s, until there were 13 people standing in the broken barn, most of them looking like they wanted to be anywhere else. Clara recognized a few faces from town. The woman in the blue calico dress who'd watched her arrive that first day, an older man who ran one of the smaller cattle operations, a younger couple who couldn't have been married more than a year. They all had the same expression, desperate, exhausted, and deeply suspicious. Tom Brennan cleared his throat. Everyone's here that's coming. Some folks said no, some didn't respond. This is what we got. Caleb nodded, stepped into the center of the circle. Thank you for coming. I know it's a risk just being here. Damn right it is, said one of the men Clara didn't know. He was maybe 35, with a scar running down his left cheek. Hutchins finds out we're meeting, he'll make examples of us. Then we better make this worth it, Clara said, moving to stand beside Caleb. She felt all eyes shift to her, assessing, judging. My name is Clara Ward. Most of you probably know I'm new here, that I don't know the history, don't understand how things work in Red Hollow. That's putting it mildly, someone muttered. Clara ignored it. But what I do understand is debt. I understand being squeezed by people with more money and more power. I understand watching everything you've built get taken apart piece by piece while you're told it's for your own good. She paused. And I understand that the only way to fight people like that is to stop fighting alone. The woman in blue crossed her arms. Pretty speech, but speeches don't pay bills. No, they don't. But cooperation might. Clara looked around the circle. How many of you are behind on bank payments? Silence. Then, slowly, 8 hands went up. How many are struggling to buy supplies because Hutchins controls credit at the general store? More hands. How many have lost cattle to mysterious circumstances? Fences cut, animals stolen, accidents that weren't accidents. Nearly everyone raised their hands this time. Clara felt something cold settle in her chest. So we're all drowning. We're all one bad month from losing everything. And we're all doing it separately, in silence, because that's safer than making noise. What's your point? Asked the man with the scar. My point is that Hutchins has power because we let him have it. Because we all need things he controls, water access, credit, supplies, and we're all too scared to look for alternatives. Clara gestured to Caleb. My husband's ranch has creek access that could supply water to most of your operations. Right now, that access is exclusive, but what if it wasn't? The silence shifted, became charged with something besides fear. Tom Brennan spoke up. You're talking about sharing water rights. That's a legal nightmare. It's also a solution, Caleb said. Right now, if you want guaranteed water access, you have to go through Hutchins. You have to buy land he controls or pay him for irrigation rights or sell to him outright. But if there was another option, if you could partner with us, formalize access through legal agreements, Hutchins would lose his leverage, the woman in blue finished. Her eyes were sharp now, calculating. He couldn't use water as a weapon. Exactly. A younger man, barely 20, shifted uncomfortably. But that's just water. He still controls the bank, the store, half the businesses in town. Water rights don't fix that. They fix part of it, Clara countered. And if enough people band together, pool resources, we could create alternatives for the rest. Shared supply runs to the next town over. Mutual aid for labor and equipment. Even cooperative credit agreements. You're talking about building a whole new economy, said an older woman with gray hair and knowing eyes. That takes time. Organization. Trust. We don't have time, the scarred man said flatly. I've got 3 weeks before the bank forecloses. Pretty ideas don't help me. Clara felt the room starting to slip away from her. She'd known this would be hard, but the reality of convincing desperate people to take another risk was harder than she'd imagined. Then Sarah Brennan stepped forward. Clara hadn't even realized Tom's wife had come, but there she was, thin and pale in the lamplight. My husband told me what Mrs. Ward proposed, Sarah said, her voice quiet but carrying in the silence. I didn't believe it would work either. Thought it was foolish, honestly. But then I thought about what happens if we do nothing. She looked around the circle. I'm dying. Doctor says 6 months, maybe less. And I've been watching my husband kill himself trying to save our ranch alone. Watching him take on more debt, more work, more risk, all by himself because he thinks that's what strength looks like. Her voice cracked. But it's not strength, it's just slow suicide. The silence was absolute. I don't know if Mrs. Ward's plan will work, Sarah continued, but I know doing nothing guarantees we lose. All of us, our ranches, our homes, our pride. Everything Hutchins wants, he'll take, one by one, until there's nothing left. She met Clara's eyes. So yeah, it's risky. It might fail, but at least it's something besides waiting to die. The woman in blue spoke next. I'm Margaret Cole. I've been ranching this land for 12 years since my husband passed. Hutchins has been after my property for 8 of those years. Tried buying me out. Tried starving me out. Tried scaring me out. She looked at Caleb. Your creek runs along my northern border. If you're serious about sharing water access, I want in. The scarred man shifted. I'm Daniel Pierce. I've got 3 weeks before I lose everything. What exactly would this cooperation look like? Specifically, Caleb pulled out a paper from his coat. I had a lawyer in the next county draw up a basic framework. It's rough, but the idea is this. Formalized water sharing agreements that give you access to the creek in exchange for mutual support. If Hutchins tries to foreclose on you, we collectively petition to buy your debt. If he cuts your fences, we all show up to repair them. We share labor, resources, and risk. That's a big ask, someone said. Why would I help you if Hutchins comes after you? That just puts me in his crosshairs. Because next time, it might be you, Clara said, and you'll want someone to show up. The young couple whispered to each other, The woman finally spoke up. We're the Dawsons. We've been married 8 months, ranching for 6. We don't have much, but we're drowning in debt, and we're terrified. She looked at her husband. We'll join. Whatever this is, we'll try it. One by one, others started speaking up. Not everyone. 3 people left without saying a word, and 2 more said they'd think about it. But by the end of the night, Clara counted 8 ranchers willing to sign preliminary agreements. 8 families willing to bet on cooperation instead of isolation. It wasn't everyone, but it was a start. They were finalizing details when they heard the horses outside. Not 1 or 2, a lot of horses, moving fast. Caleb's hand went to his rifle. Everyone stay calm. The barn doors burst open, and Lucy walked in flanked by 5 men. She was smiling, but it was the kind of smile that made Clara think of knives. Well, well, what do we have here? A secret meeting? Lucy's gaze swept the circle. Mayor Hutchins is going to be very interested to hear about this. This is private property, Tom Brennan said, stepping forward. You're trespassing. This is abandoned property. No one owns it. Lucy's smile widened. Which means we're free to observe. And what we're observing looks an awful lot like conspiracy. Conspiracy to what? Clara asked, keeping her voice level. Have a conversation? Conspiracy to defraud the bank, to illegally transfer water rights, to undermine legitimate business operations. Lucy rattled off the charges like she'd been practicing. The mayor will want to know who attended, for legal purposes, of course. Margaret Cole stepped forward. You can tell Hutchins that legal ranchers discussed legal business. Last I checked, that's not a crime. Depends on the business. Lucy pulled out a small notebook, started writing names. Let's see. Cole, Brennan, Pierce, the Dawsons. Caleb moved fast, knocking the notebook from her hand. You're not taking names. You're not reporting anything. You're leaving. Now. The men with Lucy shifted, hands moving toward weapons. The tension ratcheted up so fast Clara could barely breathe. You want to threaten me, Caleb? Lucy's voice went cold. Because I've got witnesses who'll say you assaulted me, that you threatened violence against a woman just trying to document illegal activity. There's no illegal activity here, Clara said, moving between Caleb and Lucy. Just people talking, and you have no authority to document anything. I have the authority Hutchins gives me, and right now, that's enough. Lucy bent to retrieve her notebook. You people just made a big mistake. The mayor offered you all fair deals, fair prices, fair terms. You chose to conspire against him instead. That has consequences. The only conspiracy here is Hutchins trying to steal our land, Daniel Pierce said, his voice hard, and we're done pretending otherwise. Lucy's expression shifted into something uglier. You're all fools. Especially you, Mrs. Ward. You think you can come here and change things? You're just another desperate woman who'll be gone in 6 months, probably in a pine box, just like the last Mrs. Ward. The barn went silent. Clara felt rage flood through her, hot and sharp, but beneath it was something colder, more calculated. Lucy had just made a mistake, a big one. She'd threatened Clara in front of witnesses, implied Elizabeth Ward's death wasn't natural, and revealed exactly how scared Hutchins was of this meeting. Thank you, Clara said quietly. Lucy blinked. What? Thank you for making it clear that Hutchins sees us as a real threat, that this meeting scares him enough to send you here with muscle, that he's desperate enough to make barely veiled death threats. Clara looked around at the assembled ranchers. Everyone heard that, right? Heard Lucy here suggest I might end up dead like Elizabeth Ward? The confirmation came in nods, murmurs of agreement. Lucy's face flushed. That's exactly what you said. Margaret Cole's voice was steel. And we all heard it. You might want to tell Hutchins that threatening women in front of witnesses isn't the brilliant strategy he thinks it is. Lucy looked around, realized she'd lost control of the situation, and her expression hardened. This isn't over. No, Caleb agreed. It's not. But you're leaving now, before this gets worse. Lucy stared at him for a long moment, then gestured to her men. Let's go. I've seen enough. They left in a clatter of hooves and dust. When the sound faded, the ranchers all started talking at once. She's going straight to Hutchins. He'll know who was here. We're all targets now. Quiet. Tom Brennan's voice cut through the chaos. Everyone calm down. Yes, Hutchins knows now. Yes, there will be consequences, but we knew that was a risk coming here. Knowing it's a risk and having Lucy show up with hired guns are two different things, someone said. True, but here's what else is true. Tom looked around the circle. Lucy just confirmed everything Mrs. Ward said. Hutchins is scared. Scared enough to send spies, to make threats, to try to intimidate us. That means what we're doing matters. Or it means we just painted targets on our backs for nothing, Daniel Pierce said. Clara stepped forward. It means we have a choice. We can scatter now, go home, pretend this meeting never happened, hope Hutchins lets it slide. She paused. Or we can commit, really commit, make it clear that we're not backing down, that we're serious about standing together. How? Asked one of the Dawsons. We formalize the agreements, tonight, right now. We sign papers that make this cooperation legal and binding. We create something Hutchins can't dismiss as just talk. Clara's heart was pounding. And tomorrow we tell the whole town what we're doing. We make it public. We take away his ability to threaten us in secret. That's insane, someone breathed. That's survival, Caleb corrected. Hutchins works in shadows. He pressures people quietly, uses fear to keep everyone isolated. But if we bring this into the light, if we make it clear that we're unified and we're not hiding, he loses that power. Margaret Cole was nodding slowly. It's risky. But the boy's right. Hutchins relies on secrecy and shame. We take those away, we change the game. And if it doesn't work? If he still comes after us? Then we're no worse off than we are now, Sarah Brennan said. Except we'll be facing it together instead of alone. The debate continued for another hour, but Clara could feel the shift happening. Fear was still there, but it was mixing with something else now. Anger, determination, the kind of desperate courage that came from having nothing left to lose. By the time they left the barn, 7 ranchers had signed agreements. 7 families willing to stake everything on cooperation. It wasn't the 11 who'd shown up, and it wasn't everyone who needed help. But it was enough. It had to be enough. Clara and Caleb rode home in silence, both too exhausted for conversation. But as they approached the ranch, Caleb reached over and squeezed her hand once, briefly. You did good tonight, Clara squeezed back. We're not done yet. No, but we started something. That counts. The next morning, they rode into Red Hollow together, the signed agreements in Clara's saddlebag. Word had already spread about the meeting. Lucy had made sure of that, and the streets were full of staring faces. They went straight to the sheriff's office, a small building next to the saloon. The sheriff was a man named Carson, maybe 50, with the look of someone who'd stopped caring about his job about 10 years earlier. Caleb, Mrs. Ward, what can I do for you? Caleb set the papers on Carson's desk. We're filing these water-sharing agreements, making them official legal documents. Carson picked up the papers, scanned them, and his expression soured. These are contracts between you and other ranchers for creek access. That's right. Hutchins isn't going to like this. Don't care what Hutchins likes, Clara said. These are legal agreements between property owners. You're required to file them. Look, Carson looked at her like she was something unpleasant he'd found on his boot. Mrs. Ward, I don't know how things worked where you're from, but here we have a way of doing business, a order to things. You can't just what? Make legal contracts? Conduct legal business? Clara leaned forward. Or are you saying the law doesn't apply to us because Hutchins doesn't want it to? Carson's jaw worked. I'm saying you're making trouble. We're making agreements. If that's trouble, then the law has a problem. Clara straightened. File the papers, Sheriff. Unless you want to explain to the territorial court why you refuse to process legitimate legal documents. For a long moment, Carson just stared at her. Then he grabbed a stamp, marked the papers with more force than necessary, and shoved them back across the desk. Filed. For all the good it'll do you. He looked at Caleb. You're making a mistake, Ward. A big one. Wouldn't be the first time, Caleb said, gathering the papers. Thanks for your cooperation, Sheriff. They left the office to find a crowd gathering on the street. News had traveled fast. Of course it had, in a town this small, and people wanted to see the fallout. Lucy was there, standing with Mayor Hutchins and 3 other men Clara recognized as prominent businessmen. Hutchins was smiling, but it didn't touch his eyes. Caleb? Mrs. Ward, I hear congratulations are in order. New business partnerships. Legal business partnerships, Clara corrected. All properly filed with the sheriff. Of course. I'm sure everything is entirely legal. Hutchins' smile widened. Though I do wonder about the wisdom of such arrangements. Water rights can be complicated, expensive to enforce, and of course there's the matter of your existing debts. Debts we just paid, Caleb said evenly. This month's debts, yes, but there's always next month. And the month after. Winter's coming, Caleb. Operating costs go up, cattle prices go down. It gets harder and harder to stay afloat. Hutchins paused. Especially when you're taking on additional obligations, supporting other struggling ranchers. That's very charitable, but charity requires resources you don't have. Clara felt the trap closing around them. Hutchins was right. They'd bought time with the payment, but the fundamental problem remained. They were still drowning financially, and now they'd committed to helping others in the same situation. But before she could respond, Margaret Cole stepped out of the crowd. Mayor Hutchins, I couldn't help but overhear. You're concerned about the ward's financial stability? Hutchins turned his smile on her. Mrs. Cole, always a pleasure. I'm simply noting that taking on additional obligations during difficult times can be unwise. Interesting, because I seem to recall you offering me a loan last month at 30% interest. Margaret's voice was pleasant, conversational. That's quite high, wouldn't you say? Hutchins' smile tightened. Market rates, Mrs. Cole. Supply and demand. Supply and demand, right. Margaret looked around at the gathered crowd. So when you control the only bank in town, the only place to get credit, you can charge whatever you want. Because there's no alternative, no competition. That's how business works. Is it? Because it seems to me like that's how monopolies work, and the last I checked, monopolistic practices were frowned upon, especially in territorial courts. Margaret smiled, sharp and knowing. But I'm sure the ward's new cooperative agreements have nothing to do with your concerns. I'm sure you're just being neighborly. The crowd was getting larger, people drawn by the confrontation. Clara could see the calculation in Hutchins' eyes. He was losing control of the narrative, losing the moral high ground. I'm simply looking out for the best interests of this community, Hutchins said, his voice hardening. Making sure people don't make decisions they'll regret. Like signing predatory loan agreements? Tom Brennan had appeared, Sarah beside him. Or selling their land for half its value because they've been systematically denied access to resources? Those kinds of regrets? Hutchins' pleasant mask was cracking. Mr. Brennan, I'd be careful about making accusations you can't prove. I'm not accusing. I'm observing. Tom looked at the crowd. We've all been struggling. We've all been told it's our fault. Bad luck, bad management, bad timing. But what if it's not bad luck? What if it's just bad business practices by people with too much power? Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Clara could see people nodding, whispering. This was what she'd hoped for, not just agreements on paper, but a public shift in how people understood their situation. Hutchins saw it too. His expression went cold. This town has thrived under my leadership. I've brought prosperity, stability. For yourself, Margaret cut in. You've brought prosperity for yourself and your partners. The rest of us have been barely surviving. That's not... It's exactly true. Another voice joined the conversation, Daniel Pierce, stepping forward with his scarred face set in hard lines. I've been ranching here for 15 years. Never had trouble making payments until you bought the bank. Suddenly interest rates triple, payment terms shorten, and I'm drowning. That's not coincidence. More voices joined in, people sharing stories of sudden rate increases, denied credit, pressure to sell. The crowd was turning. Clara could feel it. The mood shifting from fearful observation to angry participation. Hutchins raised his voice. You're all making a mistake. These agreements won't save you. They'll just drag you all down together. Or lift us up together, Clara said loudly. Seems to me that's what scares you. Not that we'll fail, that we'll succeed. That we'll prove there's another way besides your way. Hutchins stared at her, and for the first time Clara saw real anger in his eyes. Not calculation, not cold business strategy, but genuine rage. You're a fool, Mrs. Ward. You have no idea what you've started. Maybe not, but I know what you've been doing, and so does everyone else now. Clara looked around at the crowd. So go ahead, make your threats. Try to squeeze us harder. All you'll do is prove we were right to stand together. For a long moment, Hutchins just stood there, his face red with barely contained fury. Then he turned and walked away, his men following. Lucy shot Clara one last hateful look before trailing after them. The crowd slowly dispersed, but Clara noticed several people stopping to talk to Caleb and the others who'd signed agreements. Voices were low, urgent. More people asking questions, asking how to join. Margaret Cole approached Clara. That was either very brave or very stupid. Can it be both? Margaret laughed, sharp and surprised. I like you, Mrs. Ward. You've got spine. We're going to need that in the coming weeks. What do you think he'll do? Hutchins? Everything he can. Pressure the bank to call in loans early, cut off credit. Maybe worse. Margaret's expression sobered. But you were right to make this public. Now, if something happens to any of us, people will know who's responsible. Sarah Brennan joined them, Tom hovering protectively at her side. That was something, Sarah said. I haven't seen anyone stand up to Hutchins like that in years. Felt good, Clara admitted. Probably foolish, but good. Foolish and necessary are often the same thing. Sarah's smile was tired, but genuine. Thank you for what you're doing, for giving us something to fight for besides just survival. Clara felt something warm spread through her chest. We're all fighting together now. That's what matters. As they rode back to the ranch, Caleb was quiet, his expression thoughtful. What are you thinking? Clara finally asked. That you just declared war on the most powerful man in 3 counties, in the middle of Main Street, in front of half the town. Was that bad? Probably. Caleb looked at her, and something like admiration flickered across his face. But it was also brilliant. You made him react instead of act. Made him show his anger instead of his calculation. That's going to cost him. Or it's going to make him more dangerous. That too. Caleb was quiet for a moment. Clara, what Lucy said last night about Elizabeth, about you ending up in a pine box. I know. I won't let that happen. Clara looked at him, saw the fierce determination in his eyes, and felt something shift between them. This wasn't just business anymore. Wasn't just a contract marriage. They were partners now, truly, bound together by more than paperwork. I know, she said again, softer. And I won't let it happen to you either. They reached the ranch to find another note nailed to the door. Clara's hands shook as she pulled it down. Final warning, sell or face consequences. Caleb read it over her shoulder, his jaw tight. They're escalating. Let them. Clara crumpled the note. We're not backing down. That night, neither of them slept well. Clara lay awake in her room, listening to the wind and wondering what consequences looked like. Wondering if she'd made the right choice, bringing this fight into the open. Around midnight, she heard Caleb moving around downstairs. She pulled on her robe and found him in the kitchen, staring out the window with a rifle across his lap. Can't sleep either? She asked. He shook his head. Keeps thinking about all the ways this could go wrong. Want to share? Misery loves company. They could burn the barn, poison the cattle, cut the fences and drive the herd off. They could hurt people who signed with us. They could... He stopped. They could do a lot of things. Clara sat down across from him. They could. Or we could win. You really believe that? I have to. Because the alternative is giving up, and I'm not doing that. Clara met his eyes. We're going to fight, Caleb. We're going to fight dirty if we have to, and we're going to make them regret ever thinking we'd be easy targets. Caleb stared at her for a long moment. Then slowly, he smiled. When did you get so bloodthirsty? Somewhere between Kansas City and here. Turns out surviving makes you mean. Good. Caleb set the rifle aside. Because mean is what we're going to need. They sat together in the kitchen until dawn, making plans, preparing for war. And when the sun rose over the red Wyoming hills, Clara felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Dangerous, foolish, absolutely necessary hope. The fight was just beginning. But for the first time, they weren't fighting alone. The consequences came faster than Clara expected. 3 days after the confrontation in town, Daniel Pierce's barn burned to the ground. Not an accident. The fire started in 3 different places simultaneously, and witnesses saw riders leaving the property just before the flames took hold. By the time Pierce and his neighbors got the fire under control, he'd lost his winter hay supply, 2 horses, and most of his equipment. The sheriff ruled it an accident. Faulty lantern, he said. Nothing suspicious. Clara and Caleb arrived at Pierce's ranch the morning after, bringing what supplies they could spare. Pierce stood in the charred ruins, his face hollow with exhaustion and rage. They didn't even try to hide it, he said, kicking at a blackened beam. 3 separate fires. Sheriff knows it. Everyone knows it. But nobody's going to say a damn word. How much did you lose? Caleb asked. Everything I needed to get through winter. Hay, feed, tools. Insurance won't cover it. Policy excludes arson. And even though Carson won't call it that officially, the insurance company knows. Pierce's hands clenched into fists. I'm done. Can't recover from this. Bank's going to foreclose within a month. Clara felt her stomach drop. What if we helped? The cooperative can't replace a barn in 6 months of supplies, not without money we don't have. Pierce looked at her, and his eyes were dead. I'm sorry, Mrs. Ward, I appreciate what you tried to do. But Hutchins just showed everyone what happens when you fight back. Nobody else is going to join you now. Daniel, I'm out. I'm selling to Hutchins before he takes everything. At least this way I'll have something left. He turned away. You should do the same. Both of you. Before it's too late. They left Pierce's ranch in heavy silence. On the ride back, Clara kept replaying the scene, the burned barn, Pierce's defeated expression, the casual cruelty of it all. This is my fault, she said finally. Caleb's head snapped around. What? I pushed for this. I convinced people to stand up, to fight back. And now Pierce is losing everything because he listened to me. Pierce is losing everything because Hutchins is a bastard who burns down barns, Caleb said sharply. That's not on you. Isn't it? If I'd just stayed quiet, kept my head down, then Hutchins would have picked you off one by one anyway. Just slower. Pierce was already drowning, Clara. We all were. Caleb pulled the wagon to a stop, turned to face her fully. Don't do this. Don't blame yourself for other people's evil. But what if Daniel's right? What if nobody else joins now? What if we've just made everything worse? Caleb was quiet for a moment. Then we keep fighting anyway, because the alternative is giving up, and I've seen what that looks like. My first wife gave up, stopped fighting, stopped hoping, and it killed her. His voice went rough. I won't watch that happen again. Not to you, not to this ranch, not to any of this. Clara looked at him, saw the determination in his face, and felt something settle in her chest. Okay. Okay? Okay, we keep fighting. She took a breath. But we need to be smarter about it. Hutchins is playing dirty, and we can't afford to be the only ones following rules he's already broken. What are you thinking? Clara's mind was racing, pieces clicking together. Pierce said the insurance company knows it was arson, even if the sheriff won't say it. That means there's a record, documentation. What if we collected evidence? Not for the sheriff, for the territorial government. Built a case against Hutchins that's too big to ignore. The territorial government is 300 miles away and doesn't give a damn about range wars. They might if we frame it right. Monopolistic practices, corruption, systematic intimidation, those are federal concerns. Clara leaned forward. What if we documented everything? Every fire, every threat, every illegal squeeze play? Built a file so damning that even Hutchins' money can't bury it. Caleb stared at her. That would take months, maybe years. And we'd need proof, witnesses, people willing to go on record. We've got witnesses. Everyone at that meeting saw Lucy threaten me. Pierce can document the barn fire. Margaret Cole can testify about predatory lending practices. Clara's voice gained strength. We collect everything, send it to the territorial attorney, and make enough noise that they have to investigate. And in the meantime, while we're collecting evidence and Hutchins is burning down barns, in the meantime, we make ourselves too visible to kill quietly. We make sure everyone knows what we're doing, so if something happens to us, it's obviously retaliation. Clara met his eyes. We make ourselves dangerous by making the truth dangerous. Caleb was quiet for so long, Clara thought he'd reject the whole idea. Then he laughed, sharp and surprised. You know what's scary? That actually makes sense. Is that a yes? It's a, this is insane, but I don't have a better idea yes. He picked up the reins again. We'll need help. Can't document everything ourselves. Margaret Cole strikes me as someone who keeps good records. She does. And Tom Brennan's got connections in the next county. People who've dealt with Hutchins' business partners. Caleb urged the horses forward. This could actually work. Or get us all killed. Hard to say which. Let's aim for the first option. They spent the next week organizing. Clara turned the ranch's small study into a war room, documenting every incident, every threat, every suspicious business dealing they could verify. Margaret Cole contributed ledgers showing the bank's interest rate increases. Tom Brennan brought testimony from ranchers in neighboring counties who'd been squeezed out by similar tactics. The Dawsons provided records of supply prices that had mysteriously doubled once Hutchins bought the general store. It was tedious, exhausting work. But with each piece of evidence, Clara felt the case growing stronger. They weren't just collecting grievances. They were building a pattern, showing that Hutchins' behavior wasn't isolated incidents, but a systematic campaign of economic warfare. On the 8th day, Clara was transcribing Margaret's testimony when Caleb came in from checking the fences. "We've got company." Clara looked up. "Who?" "Sheriff Carson, and he brought friends." Through the window, Clara could see 5 horses approaching the ranch. Carson was in the lead, with 4 deputies Clara had never seen before. Her stomach clenched. "Hide the documents," Caleb said quietly. "Everything, now." Clara moved fast, shoving papers into the hidden compartment they'd built under the floorboards, covering it with a rug. By the time Carson knocked, the study looked like nothing more than a dusty room with a desk. Caleb opened the door. "Sheriff, what can I do for you?" Carson didn't smile. "Got a warrant to search the property. Judge's orders." "Warrant for what?" "Suspicion of fraud, illegal water contracts, conspiracy to defraud creditors." Carson held up the paper. "Step aside, Ward." Clara appeared at Caleb's shoulder. "Those contracts are legal. We filed them with you." "Judge seems to think otherwise. Says they're designed to hide assets and avoid legitimate debts." Carson pushed past them into the house. "Boys, search everything. I want every piece of paper in this house." The deputies spread out, and Clara felt panic rising in her throat. The hidden compartment was good, but not perfect. If they searched thoroughly enough, they'd find it. Caleb's hand found hers, squeezed once. "You got a specific list of what you're looking for, Sheriff? Or are you just fishing?" "I'm executing a legal warrant." Carson was already rifling through the kitchen drawers. "You got a problem with that? Take it up with the judge." "The same judge who's business partners with Hutchins?" Carson's expression hardened. "Careful, Ward. That sounds like you're questioning the integrity of the court." "I'm questioning the integrity of this search." Caleb didn't move from the doorway. "You show up with a warrant written by a corrupt judge, looking for evidence of crimes that don't exist." "Yeah, I'm questioning it." One of the deputies emerged from the study. "Nothing here but empty ledgers and some household accounts." Clara's heart was pounding so hard she thought everyone could hear it. The compartment had held. Carson moved toward the stairs. "Check the bedrooms. And the barn. If they're hiding something, it's here somewhere." The search took 2 hours. They went through everything. Overturned mattresses, empty drawers, even checked the henhouse. But they found nothing because there was nothing to find. Everything that mattered was hidden under 3 inches of oak flooring. Finally, Carson called his men off. "Seems like you're clean, this time." "Because we are clean," Clara said. "Those contracts are legal, Sheriff, no matter what Hutchins told the judge." Carson's eyes narrowed. "You're making a lot of accusations, Mrs. Ward. Be careful. People who accuse the wrong folks of corruption tend to find themselves in trouble." "Is that a threat?" "It's friendly advice." Carson headed for the door. "We'll be watching you, both of you. One wrong move, and I'll have you in jail so fast your heads will spin." They watched the sheriff and his men ride away. When they were finally out of sight, Clara's legs gave out. She sat down hard on the porch steps, shaking. Caleb sat beside her. "They didn't find it." "They almost did. That deputy in the study, he was standing right on top of the compartment. But he didn't find it. We're okay." Caleb's voice was steady, grounding. "And now we know Hutchins is getting desperate. That warrant was garbage. No real judge would have signed it unless they were being pressured." Clara looked at him. "Or bribed." "That too." Caleb stood, offered her his hand. "Come on. We need to document this. Add it to the file." "Caleb, they're using the law against us. The sheriff, the judge. If they're all on Hutchins' side, what chance do we have? We have the truth, and we have witnesses who saw that farce of a search. He pulled her to her feet. This is exactly the kind of thing the territorial attorney needs to see. Abuse of judicial process, harassment under color of law. It's all evidence. Clara wanted to believe him, wanted to think that truth mattered, that justice existed somewhere beyond Hutchins' reach. But it was getting harder. That night, Margaret Cole rode to the ranch alone. Clara saw her coming and met her at the door. "Margaret, what's wrong?" "Bank called in my loan, gave me 2 weeks to pay in full or they foreclose." Margaret's voice was steady, but her hands shook. $3,800. I don't have it. Nobody does. Clara felt ice slide through her veins. "Can you refinance? Find another lender?" "Who?" "Hutchins owns the only bank within 100 miles. I'd have to go to the territorial capital, and even then—" Margaret shook her head. "I'm done, Clara. They got me." No, there has to be another way." "There isn't. Not this time." Margaret looked at her with tired eyes. "I came to tell you to be careful. They're going after everyone who signed those agreements. Pierce is already selling. They came for me. You and Caleb are next."
Let them come. Clara, I mean it. Let them come. We'll fight them in court, in the papers, anywhere we have to. Clara's voice rose. We're not giving up, Margaret. Not you, not us, not anyone. And how do you plan to pay off my loan? With what money? Clara opened her mouth, then closed it. Because Margaret was right. They'd already used Clara's inheritance to make their own payment. There was nothing left. No magical solution, no hidden resources. Caleb appeared in the doorway. "How much time did they give you?" 2 weeks? Then we have 2 weeks to find a solution." Caleb looked at Clara. "Tell her." "Tell me what?" Clara took a breath. "We're building a case, documenting everything Hutchins has done, the intimidation, the arson, the corrupt business practices. We're going to send it to the territorial attorney, make enough noise that they have to investigate." Margaret was quiet for a moment. "How long will that take?" "Months, probably. Maybe longer." "I have 2 weeks." "I know, but if you can hold on, if you can delay the foreclosure somehow, we might be able to include your case in the evidence, show a pattern of illegal lending practices." Clara moved closer. "Don't sell, Margaret. Not yet. Give us a chance to fight this." "With what? Hope? Paperwork?" Margaret's laugh was bitter. "I appreciate what you're trying to do, I really do. But I live in the real world where banks foreclose and people lose their homes. Your case might work eventually, but eventually doesn't help me now." "Then we find a way to help you now." Caleb's voice was firm. "You got family. Anyone who could loan you money?" "Had a brother in Denver. Died 3 years ago. No kids, no other family." "What about selling assets, cattle, equipment?" "Not enough time. And even if I could sell everything tomorrow, I'd be lucky to get $2,000. I'm still short almost $2,000. Margaret's shoulders slumped. "I'm sorry. I know you were counting on me, but I can't lose everything on a maybe." She left before Clara could argue further. They watched her ride away, and Clara felt something crack inside her chest. "We're losing," she said quietly. "Not yet. Caleb, Pierce sold. Margaret's selling. The others will follow once they see the dominoes falling. Our entire alliance is collapsing." "Then we stop the dominoes." Caleb turned to face her. "Margaret needs $2,000 in 2 weeks. We find it." "How?" "We're broke. We used everything we had to make our own payment." Caleb was quiet for a moment. Then, "I have something. I didn't want to use it, but—" "Use what?" He led her to the barn, to a corner where old tack and equipment was stored. Behind a pile of worn saddles was a wooden crate. Caleb pried it open, and Clara saw the gleam of metal inside. "Elizabeth's jewelry," Caleb said quietly. "Her mother's silver, some gold pieces, a few precious stones. She wanted to save it for children we never had." His voice went rough. "It's worth maybe $1,500 if we can find the right buyer." Clara stared at the jewelry, thinking about Elizabeth Ward, about the woman who'd lived here before her, who'd saved these precious things for a future that never came. "Caleb, you can't. This is all you have left of her." "I have the ranch. I have the memories. I don't need metal and stones. He closed the crate.
And if selling this saves Margaret's ranch, saves the alliance, gives us a fighting chance, Elizabeth would have wanted that. She believed in fighting back, even when it cost her. Clara felt tears burning behind her eyes. We're still 500 short. I know. Caleb met her gaze. You got anything else hidden? Any other secrets tucked away? Clara thought about her mother's ring, still wrapped in cloth in her dresser drawer. The last piece of her old life. The only thing that connected her to who she'd been before Wyoming. I have a ring. Gold, with a small diamond. Maybe worth 300 if I'm lucky. That's not enough. No, but it's something. Clara took a breath. And I can write to my aunt in Philadelphia. She didn't approve of my marriage, but she might loan me money if I frame it right. If I'm lucky, I could get 200 within a week. Caleb was quiet, calculating. 1,500 from the jewelry, 300 from the ring, 200 from your aunt. That's 2,000. Exactly what Margaret needs. If everything goes perfectly, if the jewelry sells for what we hope, if my aunt sends money, if we can pull it all together in 2 weeks. Clara laughed, but it came out shaky. Those are a lot of ifs. Yeah, but they're better than giving up. Caleb touched her face, gentle. We're going to do this. We're going to save Margaret's ranch, and then we're going to take down Hutchins, together. Clara leaned into his hand, feeling the roughness of his calluses, the steadiness of his presence. When did this stop being just business? When you stood up to Lucy in the middle of Main Street. Maybe before. Caleb's thumb brushed her cheek. I meant what I said. I won't let them hurt you. And I meant what I said. We're in this together. Clara stepped closer, and Caleb's arms came around her, solid and warm. They stood like that for a long moment, taking strength from each other. Then Clara pulled back. We need to move fast. Where can we sell the jewelry? There's a jeweler in the next county. Honest man, or as honest as any jeweler gets. I'll ride there tomorrow. I'll write to my aunt tonight and send a telegram to make sure she gets the letter. Clara touched the crate. Are you sure about this? No, but I'm sure about you, about us, about what we're building here. Caleb's expression was fierce. Hutchins wants to break us. I'd rather die than give him the satisfaction. They spent that evening making plans. Clara wrote a carefully worded letter to her aunt, not begging, but presenting it as a business opportunity, an investment in Wyoming land development. It was close enough to the truth to work, if her aunt didn't look too closely. Caleb inventoried the jewelry, making notes on each piece. Elizabeth's mother's silver service, a gold locket, 2 rings with small gems, a necklace that had belonged to Elizabeth's grandmother. Tell me about her, Clara said, watching him work. Elizabeth? Yeah, I know the basics, but what was she like? Caleb was quiet for a moment. Strong, stubborn, had a laugh that could shake the rafters when something really got her. He smiled, distant. She hated Wyoming at first, thought I'd brought her to hell. But she stuck it out, learned to love the land. We were going to build something together. A family, a real ranch, a legacy. I'm sorry you didn't get that. So am I. Caleb set down the locket. But I'm not sorry you're here now. Different doesn't mean worse. Clara felt warmth spread through her chest. Different doesn't mean worse, she repeated. I like that. The next morning, Caleb left before dawn to ride to the next county. Clara spent the day working on the documentation, adding notes about the illegal search, about Margaret's suddenly called loan, about the pattern of retaliation against anyone who stood with them. Around noon, Tom Brennan arrived with Sarah. One look at Sarah's face told Clara something was wrong. What happened? Bank called in our loan too, Tom said flatly. Same terms as Margaret. 2 weeks, full payment, or we lose everything. Clara's heart sank. How much? 3,000. We're working on getting money for Margaret. We know. She told us. Tom's voice was heavy. Clara, they're doing this to everyone. The Dawsons got the same notice this morning, so did the Mitchells and the Carsons. Everyone who signed your agreements is being squeezed simultaneously. Clara felt the room spin. That's over $15,000. We can't possibly. No, you can't. Sarah's voice was gentle but firm. This is over, Clara. Hutchins won. He's calling in every loan at once, knowing we can't all pay. He'll foreclose on all of us within a month, buy the properties for nothing, and consolidate his control over the entire water system. There has to be a way, but there isn't. Not this time. Tom put his hand on Clara's shoulder. You tried. You really tried. But some fights you just can't win. They left, and Clara stood alone in the study, staring at the documents spread across the desk. Months of work. Evidence of crimes, of corruption, of systematic abuse. And none of it mattered because they were out of time. She was still standing there when Caleb came back hours earlier than expected. Jeweler wouldn't buy, he said without preamble. Said the market's flooded right now. Best he could offer was $800. That's half what it's worth. Did you take it? No, because I ran into someone in town who had a better idea. Caleb set his saddlebag on the desk. Remember how I said Elizabeth had family in Montana? Her cousin owns a mining operation up there. Successful, respectable, has money. Clara's heart rate kicked up. And I sent him a telegram, explained the situation, not all of it, but enough, asked if he'd consider buying the jewelry for what it's worth as a family favor. Caleb pulled out a telegram response. He wired back 2 hours later. He'll pay full value, $1,500, if we can get it to him within a week. But Clara, there's more. What? I told him about the water cooperative, about what we're trying to build, and he's interested. Not just in the jewelry, but in the concept. Caleb's voice gained intensity. He wants to invest. Said if we can prove the model works, he'd put up money to expand it. Real money. Enough to cover the loans Hutchins just called in. Clara stared at him. How much? $20,000. As a business investment, not charity. He'd become a partner in the cooperative, get a share of future profits. But the money would be available within a month if we can show him the concept is viable. A month? Tom said we have 2 weeks before the foreclosures start. I know, so we need to delay them somehow. File challenges, claim procedural errors, anything to buy time. Caleb grabbed her hands. This could work, Clara. If we can hold on just a little longer, we might actually win this. Clara wanted to believe it, wanted to think that salvation was really this close. But she'd been disappointed too many times, had seen too many hopes crumble. What if it doesn't work? What if Elizabeth's cousin changes his mind, or the delays don't hold, or Hutchins finds another way to crush us? Then we lose. But Clara, we're losing anyway if we do nothing. At least this way we're fighting until the end. Caleb pulled her closer. I know you're tired. I know this has been brutal. But please, don't give up yet. Clara looked at him. At this man who'd been a stranger 4 months ago, who'd become her partner, her ally, her something more. She thought about Margaret and Tom and Daniel Pierce and all the others who'd trusted her enough to stand up. Okay, she said finally. Okay, we fight. But Caleb, if we're doing this, we go all in. No more half measures. We take every piece of evidence we have, and we don't just send it to the territorial attorney. We send it to newspapers, to other law enforcement, to anyone who might listen. We make so much noise that Hutchins can't silence us. That'll make us even bigger targets. We're already targets. Might as well make it count. Clara squeezed his hands. And we tell everyone what we're doing, the whole cooperative. Let them decide if they want to keep fighting or if they want to sell. No more making choices for people. Caleb nodded slowly. We call a meeting. Tomorrow night. Lay it all out. The evidence we've collected, the investment offer, the risks. Let them choose. And if they choose to quit, then we respect that, but we give them the choice. He pulled her into his arms, and Clara let herself lean into his strength. We can do this. I know it looks impossible, but we've done impossible before. Clara held on to him, feeling his heartbeat against her cheek, and let herself believe. Just for a moment, let herself think that maybe, just maybe, they really could win. The meeting the next night was bigger than Clara expected. Not just the original 7 who'd signed agreements, but their families, their workers, and others from town who'd heard rumors and wanted to see for themselves. The abandoned barn was packed with over 40 people, all of them scared and angry and desperate for answers. Clara stood in the center, Caleb beside her, and told them everything. About the evidence they'd collected, about Elizabeth's cousin and his investment offer, about the territorial attorney and the case they were building, and about the risk, the very real possibility that fighting back would cost them everything. When she finished, the silence was absolute. Then Tom Brennan stood.
I'm in. Sarah and I talked about it. We're dying anyway. Her literally, me slowly. Might as well go down swinging. Margaret Cole was next. Already lost everything once when my husband died. Learned to survive that. I can survive this too. Count me in. One by one, the others spoke. Some said they were out, couldn't risk it, had to think of their families. Clara didn't blame them, but more stayed than left. More chose to fight than to surrender. By the end of the night, they had 12 families committed. 12 families willing to bet everything on a plan that might fail, on evidence that might not matter, on hope that felt fragile as glass. It wasn't everyone, but it was enough. As people filed out, making plans to file legal challenges to the foreclosures, to coordinate evidence gathering, to prepare for the fight ahead, Clara felt Caleb's hand find hers. "We really doing this?" he asked quietly. "We really are. Could all blow up in our faces." "Probably will," Clara smiled despite the fear churning in her gut. "But at least we'll blow up together." Caleb laughed, pulled her close, and kissed her forehead. "Remind me why I married you?" "Because I was the only one desperate enough to answer the ad?" "No, because you're brave enough to fight battles you might not win. Because you make me believe impossible things are possible." He kissed her again, properly this time, and Clara felt something settle in her chest. They were going to war, against Hutchins, against corruption, against a system designed to crush people like them. But they weren't alone anymore. And that, Clara was learning, made all the difference. The legal challenges bought them 10 days. Not the month they needed, but 10 days of breathing room while lawyers argued procedural technicalities and judges, even corrupt ones, had to at least pretend to follow the law. 10 days to make Elizabeth's cousin believe in their cooperative enough to send $20,000 to a territory he'd never visited, to people he'd never met. Clara spent those 10 days writing the most important letter of her life. She sat at the kitchen table every night after the ranch work was done, drafting and redrafting, trying to find words that would convince a Montana mining magnate that a ragtag alliance of struggling Wyoming ranchers was worth investing in. Caleb read each version, offering suggestions, crossing out anything that sounded too desperate or too arrogant. "You need to sell the business model, not beg for charity," he said on the third night, reading her latest attempt. "Thomas Whitmore isn't sentimental. He loved Elizabeth, but he's not sending money out of grief. He needs to believe this will work." "How do I prove that in a letter? We don't have profits to show. We don't have a track record. We have something better. We have necessity." Caleb tapped the paper. 12 families controlling access to the largest creek system in 3 counties. That's not just survival. That's leverage. Hutchins wants this land because water is power. We're offering Thomas a stake in that power. Clara looked at the letter with fresh eyes. He was right. She'd been framing this as a rescue mission when she should have been framing it as an opportunity. She started over. The final version was 3 pages long, laying out the water rights, the cooperative structure, the projected growth as more ranchers joined, and the very real profit potential if they could break Hutchins' monopoly. She included testimonials from Margaret and Tom, financial projections that Caleb helped her calculate, and a detailed map of the creek system showing exactly what Thomas would be investing in. "It's good," Caleb said when she showed him the finished product. "Really good. If he's half the businessman I remember, he'll see the potential. And if he doesn't?" Caleb was quiet for a moment. "Then we lose, but we lose knowing we tried everything." They sent the letter by express courier, paying extra to guarantee delivery within 3 days. Then they waited. While they waited, Hutchins made his next move. It came in the form of an announcement in the Red Hollow Gazette, the town's weekly newspaper that Hutchins owned through a shell company. The headline read, "Town celebrates progress as new development plans announced." Clara read the article with growing horror. Hutchins was publicly announcing plans to develop the land he'd acquire through foreclosures into a modern agricultural cooperative, using the exact language Clara had used to describe their water-sharing agreements. He was stealing their idea, reframing it as his own innovation, and positioning himself as the visionary bringing progress to Red Hollow. "He's trying to undercut us," Margaret said when she came by the ranch that evening, newspaper in hand. "If he can convince people that he's building the same thing we are, just with more resources and respectability, we lose support." "More than that," Tom added. He'd ridden over with Margaret, his face grim.
He's setting up a narrative where we're the troublemakers disrupting his legitimate business plans. When he forecloses and takes the land, he can say he's just implementing his vision for community development. Clara threw the newspaper across the room. That's our idea, our cooperative. He's been trying to destroy it for weeks, and now he's claiming credit for it? That's how men like Hutchins work, Caleb said quietly. They don't create. They steal and rebrand, make it look like their idea all along. We need to fight back, publicly. Claire's mind was already racing. We publish our own announcement, lay out the timeline, show that we started this cooperative weeks ago, make it clear that Hutchins is copying us. With what money? The Gazette won't print anything against Hutchins, and we can't afford to start our own newspaper. Clara thought for a moment. We don't need a newspaper. We need witnesses. People who were at that first meeting, who saw us create the cooperative before Hutchins ever mentioned it. We get them to sign statements. We post them publicly. We make enough noise that his version of events falls apart. That'll make him escalate, Tom warned. Let him escalate. We're already at war. Might as well fight it in the open. They spent the next 2 days collecting testimonies. Not everyone would sign. Some were too scared. Some had already decided to sell to Hutchins and didn't want to jeopardize their deals. But enough people remembered the barn meeting, remembered Lucy's threats, remembered Hutchins's anger in the street. They signed statements dated and witnessed, creating a paper trail that contradicted Hutchins' narrative. Clara took the statements to the post office and had them officially notarized by a traveling notary who happened to be passing through town. Then she posted copies on the bulletin board outside the general store, the saloon, and the church. By noon, half the town had seen them. By evening, Hutchins showed up at the ranch with Sheriff Carson and 3 hired men. You're slandering me, Hutchins said without preamble, standing in Clara's kitchen like he owned it. Those statements are lies designed to damage my reputation and interfere with my business dealings. Those statements are testimony from witnesses to events that actually happened, Clara corrected. If you think they're lies, sue me. Don't tempt me, Mrs. Ward. I'm not tempting, I'm inviting. Take me to court, put your version of events under oath, let a jury decide who's telling the truth. Clara crossed her arms. Or are you worried that might not go your way? Hutchins' face flushed red. You're playing a dangerous game. So are you. The difference is I have nothing left to lose. You have everything. Clara stepped closer. You've built your power on fear and secrets. What happens when people stop being afraid? When the secrets come out? You think a few signed statements scare me? I have lawyers who will tear those apart in minutes. Then do it. File your lawsuit. Let's see what a judge says when we bring in testimony about burned barns, illegal searches, predatory lending, and possibly murder. The kitchen went absolutely silent. Even Carson looked uncomfortable. Hutchins' voice went deadly quiet. You're accusing me of murder? I'm saying there are questions about Elizabeth Ward's death that were never properly investigated. I'm saying that Daniel Pierce's barn burning was ruled an accident despite clear evidence of arson. I'm saying that a lot of convenient tragedies seem to happen to people who stand in your way. Clara held his gaze. And I'm saying that if anything happens to me or my husband, there are documents already prepared and ready to be sent to multiple law enforcement agencies detailing exactly why you'd want us dead. It was a bluff, mostly. They'd prepared some documentation, but nothing as comprehensive as Clara was implying. But Hutchins didn't know that. He stared at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he smiled, cold and sharp. You know what I think, Mrs. Ward? I think you're bluffing. I think you're desperate and scared and throwing out wild accusations because you know you're about to lose everything. Then call my bluff. Oh, I will, but not by playing your game. Hutchins turned to Carson. Sheriff, I want you to investigate these allegations of slander and defamation. And while you're at it, look into the Ward's business practices. I have reason to believe they're operating an illegal water monopoly in violation of territorial water rights laws. Clara felt ice slide through her veins. That's absurd. Our agreements are completely legal. Are they? Because territorial law is very specific about water rights allocation. If you're denying access to other property owners, if you're charging fees without proper licensing, if you're operating as a utility without government approval, those are serious crimes, Mrs. Ward. Carson was already taking notes. I'll need to see all your contracts, all your financial records, everything related to this so-called cooperative. You can't just, I can with probable cause. And Mayor Hutchins just gave me plenty. Carson's smile was smug. We'll start with a full audit. Should take a few weeks. During which time, I'm afraid I'll have to recommend that all cooperative activities be suspended pending investigation. You're shutting us down, Caleb said flatly. I'm ensuring compliance with the law. If your operations are legal, you have nothing to worry about. They left, and Clara felt the walls closing in. Without the cooperative actively operating, they couldn't demonstrate its value to Thomas Whitmore. Without that proof, the investment wouldn't come. And without the investment, they couldn't fight the foreclosures. Hutchins had just checkmated them. We need a new plan, Clara said, trying to keep the panic out of her voice. Fast. Caleb was pacing, his expression darker than Clara had ever seen it. He's going to bury us in legal red tape until the foreclosures go through. By the time we prove the cooperative is legal, it won't matter because we'll have lost the land. So we don't wait for the audit to clear us. We prove the cooperative works despite the suspension. How? Clara's mind raced through possibilities, discarding options as fast as she thought of them. Then an idea struck, crazy and risky and possibly brilliant. The public weighing, she said slowly. Caleb stopped pacing. What? Remember how Lucy threatened me at that first barn meeting? Said the town would watch me fail, probably put me on a scale to prove I wasn't fit for ranch life? Clara's voice gained strength. What if we turned that around? What if we organized a public demonstration, not of me, but of the cooperative? Show the whole town how it works, what it provides, why it matters. Hutchins would never allow it. He can't stop it if it's framed as a community event, a harvest celebration or something. We invite everyone, we demonstrate the water sharing system in action, we let people see for themselves that this works. Clara grabbed Caleb's arm, and we make sure Thomas Whitmore's representative is there to witness it. Thomas is in Montana. But he could send someone, a lawyer, an accountant, someone who can verify that the cooperative is operational and viable. Clara was talking faster now, the plan coming together. We need proof this works, so we create proof, publicly, undeniably, in front of the whole town. Caleb stared at her. That's insane. Probably. Hutchins will try to sabotage it. Let him try. In front of witnesses in broad daylight. Every move he makes will just prove our point. And if it doesn't work, if people don't show up or Whitmore's representative isn't impressed or Hutchins finds a way to shut it down anyway, Clara met his eyes. Then we lose. But at least we go down fighting in the light instead of being buried in paperwork in the dark. Caleb was quiet for a long moment. Then he laughed, sharp and surprised. You know what? I'm in. Let's do something crazy. They organized the event for the following Saturday, just 5 days away, cutting it dangerously close to when the legal delays would expire and the foreclosures would proceed. Clara sent an express telegram to Thomas Whitmore explaining the plan and begging him to send a representative. Caleb spread word through the cooperative members, framing it as a community gathering to celebrate their partnership. Margaret took charge of organizing the demonstration itself. We'll show the water distribution system in action, set up irrigation demonstrations, show how the cooperative manages allocation, prove that this isn't just theory, it's working infrastructure. Tom Brennan volunteered to coordinate the ranchers. We'll bring livestock, show how the shared water access has improved our operations, provide testimony about the benefits. Even the Dawsons, young and terrified, stepped up. We'll bring our financial records, show how cooperative purchasing has reduced our costs. Make it real and specific. The energy was building. Clara could feel it. People who'd been beaten down and scared were finding purpose again, finding something worth fighting for. But Hutchins wasn't idle. 3 days before the event, the Gazette published another article. This one claimed that the so-called cooperative was operating illegally and that attendees of Saturday's event could be considered accomplices to criminal activity. The sheriff had signed off on the warning, making it official. He's trying to scare people away, Margaret said, reading the article with disgust. It's working. I've had 2 families tell me they're not coming, Tom reported. They're afraid of legal repercussions. Clara felt frustration burning in her chest. We need to counter this. Show that it's all bluster. How? The Gazette won't publish anything we write. Then we don't use the Gazette. Clara grabbed paper and pen. We write our own flyers. Simple, direct, explaining that attending a public demonstration isn't illegal and that Hutchins is using scare tactics. We hand them out on the street, post them everywhere, make sure everyone in town sees the truth. They spent that evening printing flyers, crude, handwritten, but clear. Caleb rode into town before dawn and posted them before anyone could stop him. By the time the sheriff noticed and tried to tear them down, half the town had already seen them. The pushback was immediate. That afternoon, 2 of Hutchins' hired men showed up at the ranch. "Mr. Hutchins suggests you cancel Saturday's event," one of them said. He was big, scarred, with the kind of eyes that had seen violence and didn't mind causing more. "For your own safety." "That a threat?" Caleb asked, rifle in hand. "It's friendly advice. Accidents happen at public gatherings. People get hurt. Would be a shame if someone got trampled by livestock or injured by falling equipment." Clara stepped out onto the porch. "Tell Hutchins that the event is happening, and tell him that if any accidents occur, we'll make sure everyone knows exactly who arranged them." The man's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Brave words, Mrs. Ward. Hope you can back them up." They left, and Clara felt her hands shaking. Caleb put his arm around her. "They're serious," he said quietly. "Hutchins is done with subtle. If we go through with this, he'll try to stop it, violently if necessary. Then we make sure there are too many witnesses for violence. We invite everyone, not just ranchers, but townspeople, families, children. We make it a real celebration." Clara looked at him. "Hutchins can threaten us in private, but he can't attack a community gathering without revealing exactly who he is. You're betting our lives on that. I'm betting our lives on the idea that most people are decent, that when given a choice between Hutchins' version of events and the truth, they'll choose truth." Clara squeezed his hand. "Am I wrong?" Caleb was quiet for a moment. "I don't know, but I guess we're about to find out." Saturday arrived cold and clear. They'd set up the demonstration in a field halfway between town and the ranch, neutral ground, accessible to everyone. Margaret and Tom had arrived at dawn to help set up the irrigation displays. The Dawsons brought their financial records and a hand-painted sign explaining the cooperative's economic benefits. By 9 in the morning, people started arriving. Not just cooperative members, but curious townspeople, families with children, even some of Hutchins' business associates who wanted to see what all the fuss was about. Clara counted over 100 people by 10 o'clock, far more than she'd dared hope for. And standing at the edge of the crowd, taking notes, was a well-dressed man Clara didn't recognize. She made her way over to him. "Can I help you?" The man turned, and his smile was professional but warm. "Mrs. Ward, I'm James Hendricks, attorney for Thomas Whitmore. He sent me to evaluate your cooperative and provide a report." Clara's heart leapt. "You came." "Mr. Whitmore was intrigued by your letter. He asked me to assess whether this venture is worth his investment." Hendricks gestured at the gathering crowd. "Quite a turnout. We're showing how the cooperative works, the water distribution system, the economic benefits, the community support." Clara tried to keep her voice professional despite her nerves. "Everything you need to evaluate is here." "Excellent. I'll be observing closely." Clara wanted to say more, to convince him, to explain how desperately they needed his positive report, but Hendricks had already turned his attention to the irrigation display, making notes. She found Caleb near the water demonstration, where Tom was explaining the creek access system to a group of fascinated onlookers. "Whitmore's lawyer is here," she whispered. Caleb's eyes widened. "Good or bad?" "Don't know yet. He's observing." Clara took a breath. "We need to make this count." The demonstration went better than Clara had dared hope. Tom's explanation of the water system was clear and compelling. Margaret walked people through the economic benefits, showing actual numbers, actual savings. The Dawsons gave testimony about how the cooperative had saved their ranch from bankruptcy. People asked questions. Real questions, thoughtful ones. Not hostile, just curious. And as the morning wore on, Clara saw understanding dawn on face after face. This wasn't some radical scheme. It was practical, beneficial, something that made sense. She was starting to think they might actually pull this off when she saw Hutchins arrive. He came with Sheriff Carson, the judge who'd signed the foreclosure orders, and at least a dozen men Clara recognized as his hired muscle. They didn't try to hide their presence. They wanted to be seen, wanted to intimidate. The crowd noticed immediately. Conversations faltered. Parents pulled their children closer.
Hutchins walked straight to the center of the gathering, and the crowd parted for him like water around a stone. "This demonstration is illegal," he announced loudly. "Sheriff Carson has orders to shut it down immediately." Carson stepped forward, looking uncomfortable but determined. "I'm going to have to ask everyone to disperse. This gathering is in violation of—" "In violation of what?" Margaret Cole interrupted, stepping forward.
"What law are we breaking by demonstrating a legal water distribution system? The cooperative is under investigation. All operations are suspended pending. This isn't an operation. It's a demonstration, an educational event." Tom Brennan joined Margaret. "Last I checked, education wasn't illegal. You're obstructing an official investigation. We're showing people how our system works. That's not obstruction, that's transparency." Caleb's voice rang out clear and strong. "Unless you're worried that transparency might reveal some uncomfortable truths?" Hutchins' face flushed with anger. "You want truth? Here's truth. You're all being used. The wards are desperate, drowning in debt, and they're dragging you down with them. This cooperative is a scam designed to delay the inevitable while they scramble for money they don't have. Is that right?" Clara stepped forward, and she felt the rage that had been building for months finally find its target. "Then explain why you're so desperate to shut us down. If we're failing anyway, why not just let us fail? Why the threats, the barn burnings, the intimidation? I don't know what you're—" "Everyone here knows exactly what I'm talking about. Daniel Pierce's barn didn't burn itself. Margaret Cole's loan wasn't called in by coincidence. The sheriff's search of our home wasn't random." Clara's voice grew stronger. "You've been systematically destroying anyone who stands up to you. And now you're here to destroy this gathering because you're terrified it might work. Watch yourself, Mrs. Ward." "Or what? You'll have me killed like Elizabeth Ward? Oh, I'm sorry. She died of fever. How convenient. How very convenient that every obstacle to your plans either has accidents or catches mysterious illnesses." The crowd was silent now, everyone staring. Even Hutchins' men looked uncomfortable. Hutchins' voice went deadly quiet. "You're accusing me of murder in front of witnesses. That's slander. That's a question that deserves investigation," said a new voice. Everyone turned to see James Hendricks step forward, his notebook in hand. "I'm James Hendricks, attorney representing Thomas Whitmore of Montana. I've been observing today's demonstration, but I've also been listening to the accusations being made." He looked at Hutchins. "And I have to say, Mayor, if even half of what Mrs. Ward is suggesting is true, there are serious legal questions that need answering." Hutchins stared at him. "This is none of your concern. It's very much my concern if my client is considering investing in a cooperative that's being illegally targeted by local authorities. That's the kind of corruption that creates liability." Hendricks turned to the crowd. "I'd like to hear from anyone who has evidence of intimidation, illegal searches, property damage, or other suspicious activities. My client wants to ensure his investment would be entering a fair business environment." For a moment, nobody moved. Then Sarah Brennan stepped forward. "My husband's fences have been cut 3 times in the past month, always at night, always right before important cattle moves. We reported it to the sheriff. Nothing was ever investigated. Our supply prices doubled overnight when Hutchins bought the general store," the younger Dawson said. "Same products, same suppliers, double the cost. When we complained, we were told that's just how it is now." One by one, people came forward with stories. Not just cooperative members, but townspeople who'd been squeezed, pressured, threatened. The testimony built like a wave, and Clara watched Hutchins' face grow darker and darker. "This is orchestrated," Hutchins said, his voice shaking with rage. "The Wards put them up to this." "I didn't put anyone up to anything," Clara said. "I just gave them a chance to speak, something you've been preventing for years." "Sheriff, arrest her. Arrest all of them. This is conspiracy." "Actually," Hendricks interrupted, still taking notes, "this sounds like testimony that could be relevant to multiple legal proceedings. Sheriff, I'd be very careful about arresting witnesses before they've had a chance to provide official statements." Carson looked between Hutchins and Hendricks, clearly torn. "I'd also note," Hendricks continued, "that several of these accusations, if proven, would constitute federal crimes. Intimidation of witnesses, corruption of local officials, monopolistic practices. The territorial government takes these things very seriously." "Who the hell are you to threaten me?" Hutchins demanded. "I'm not threatening anyone. I'm simply observing that my client's investment decision will depend heavily on the legal environment here, And right now, that environment looks extremely questionable. Hendricks closed his notebook. I'll be filing a full report with Mr. Whitmore, including recommendations that he work with territorial authorities to ensure his investment is protected. The implication was clear. Thomas Whitmore had money, connections, and political pull. If he decided Red Hollow was a problem, he could make it a territorial problem, and that was something even Hutchins couldn't buy his way out of. Hutchins seemed to realize this. His face went from red to pale, and when he spoke, his voice was tight with barely controlled fury. This isn't over. No, Clara agreed. It's not, because we're filing charges. Official charges with the territorial attorney, with federal marshals, with anyone who'll listen. We're documenting everything, and we're making sure that even if something happens to us, the truth gets out. You're making a mistake. The only mistake was thinking you'd get away with this forever. Clara looked around at the assembled crowd. Everyone here has seen what you are. They've heard the testimony, and they know that this cooperative isn't a scam. It's the only thing standing between them and your complete control. Hutchins stared at her with pure hatred. Then, without another word, he turned and walked away, his men following. Carson hesitated, looking like he wanted to say something, but finally followed the mayor. The silence they left behind was profound. Then, slowly, people started talking again, asking questions, coming up to Clara and Caleb and the other cooperative members saying they wanted to join, wanted to help, wanted to stand together. Hendricks approached Clara, and his expression was carefully neutral. That was quite a performance. Clara's stomach clenched. It wasn't a performance. It was the truth. I believe you. That's the problem. He pulled out his notebook again. Mrs. Ward, Mr. Ward, I need you to understand something. My client is a businessman. He's interested in profit, not justice. If this situation is as corrupt as it appears, investing here becomes extremely risky. Clara felt her heart sink. So you're recommending against the investment? I'm recommending a conditional investment. Hendricks' expression softened slightly. Mister, Whitmore will provide the $20,000, but with two conditions. First, you must file formal charges with territorial authorities within 1 week. Document everything, make it official, and pursue it aggressively. Second, you must expand the cooperative to include at least 20 ranching families within 6 months. Show that this model is sustainable and growing. And if we can't meet those conditions, then the investment is recalled and you're on your own. Hendricks met her eyes. But Mrs. Ward, I don't think that will be a problem. You've already done the hard part. You've made people believe. Now you just need to follow through. Clara felt tears burning behind her eyes. So we're getting the investment? You're getting the investment. Funds will be wired to the bank within 3 days. Hendricks smiled, genuine this time. Congratulations. You've impressed a man who's not easily impressed. The next week moved like a whirlwind. The $20,000 arrived exactly when promised, allowing them to pay off Margaret's loan, Tom's loan, and the other cooperative members facing foreclosure. Hutchins tried to refuse the payments, but his own bank officers, facing scrutiny from territorial authorities, forced him to accept them. Clara and Caleb filed formal charges with the territorial attorney, submitting over 200 pages of documented evidence. The Attorney General himself came to Red Hollow to investigate, bringing federal marshals and creating enough pressure that even Hutchins-bought judges couldn't ignore it. The investigation revealed everything: the predatory lending, the intimidation, the mysterious fires and accidents. They even found evidence connecting Hutchins to Elizabeth Ward's death. The doctor who'd fled town had kept records, and when federal agents tracked him down, he confessed that Hutchins had paid him to misdiagnose Elizabeth's illness, to delay treatment until it was too late. Hutchins was arrested on a Tuesday morning, along with Sheriff Carson and 3 other town officials. The charges included fraud, conspiracy, attempted murder, and a dozen other crimes. His assets were frozen pending trial, and his business empire began crumbling almost immediately. Clara stood on the porch of the ranch house watching federal marshals escort Hutchins to a wagon in chains and felt a complicated mix of triumph and exhaustion. "How does it feel?" Caleb asked, joining her. "Like we survived." "More than survived. We won." He put his arm around her waist. "You won." Clara leaned into him, feeling the solid warmth of his presence. "We won. Together." The cooperative grew rapidly after Hutchins' arrest. With the threat removed and the model proven, ranchers from across 3 counties started joining. By spring, they had 43 member families, and Thomas Whitmore was already discussing expanding the investment. The town of Red Hollow changed too. New businesses opened, no longer strangled by Hutchins' monopolistic control. The bank got new management. Even the Gazette changed hands, bought by a consortium of local families who promised honest reporting. It wasn't perfect. Lucy and her friends still whispered, still looked at Clara with resentment. Some families who'd profited from Hutchins' regime never forgave the cooperative for destroying their easy money. And the scars from years of corruption didn't heal overnight. But it was better. Measurably, undeniably better. 6 months after Hutchins' arrest, on a cold February morning, Sarah Brennan passed away peacefully in her sleep. Tom held her hand and told her that the ranch was saved, that her fight had mattered, that she could rest now knowing she'd won. The funeral was huge. Over 200 people, many of them ranchers who'd joined the cooperative and wanted to honor the woman who'd stood up when standing up cost everything. Clara spoke at the service, talking about courage and sacrifice, and the difference one person's bravery could make. She talked about how Sarah had chosen to fight when she could have chosen peace, had chosen hope when despair would have been easier. After the service, Tom found Clara and hugged her tight. "Thank you," he said, his voice rough with grief, "for giving Sarah something to fight for at the end, for making her last months matter." "She's the one who made them matter," Clara replied. "We just gave her the battlefield." Spring came early that year. The ranch, which had been dying when Clara arrived, was thriving now. New fences, repaired barn, healthy cattle, and a future that looked nothing like the desperate survival she'd expected. Clara stood in the field one morning, watching Caleb work with the horses, and marveled at how much had changed in less than a year. She'd come to Wyoming as nobody, a woman with no options, no power, no prospects. A contractual wife purchased like furniture because she was cheap and available. Now she was a founding partner in a multi-county agricultural cooperative. She had allies, friends, a community that respected her, and she had Caleb, not as a business arrangement anymore, but as something real. They'd never had a proper wedding, never exchanged romantic vows, never promised each other forever. But they'd fought together, bled together, built something together. That was worth more than any ceremony. Caleb saw her watching and walked over, dusty and sweating from work. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "About how I came here expecting to survive and ended up living instead." He smiled, the expression transforming his usually serious face. "Yeah, same." "You know what I realized?" Clara took his hand. "Back in Kansas City, I thought I was nobody. That my life was over because I didn't fit into the boxes society built. But I wasn't nobody. I was just in the wrong place. And now? Now I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be, fighting battles that matter, building something real, with people who see me for what I actually am, not what I'm supposed to be." Caleb pulled her closer. "And what are you actually?" Clara thought about the question. A year ago, she would have said she was a failure, a spinster, a woman nobody wanted. Now? "I'm someone who doesn't quit, someone who fights dirty when necessary and fights fair when possible, someone who'd rather die standing than live on her knees." She looked up at him. "And someone who's grateful every day that you answered my contract instead of someone prettier or younger or easier." "Easier would have been boring." Caleb kissed her forehead. "And I like you complicated." "Good, because I'm not changing. Wouldn't want you to." They stood together in the Wyoming sunshine, two people who'd been broken and desperate and alone, who'd found each other not through romance but through necessity, and who'd built something stronger than love. Partnership. Trust. Mutual respect earned through shared battles. The cooperative's spring meeting was scheduled for the following week, and Clara had reports to prepare, finances to review, expansion plans to finalize. There was always more work, more challenges, more fights ahead. But standing there with Caleb, on land they'd fought to keep, surrounded by a community they'd helped save, Clara felt something she hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not the peace of surrender, but the peace of knowing that whatever came next, she could handle it. They could handle it. Together. She was the woman nobody wanted who'd become the woman everyone needed. The outsider who'd reshaped the entire community. The desperate mail-order bride who'd conquered the frontier, not with gentleness or submission, but with spine, strategy, and sheer stubborn refusal to be broken. And she'd redefined her worth entirely on her own terms. That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset over the red Wyoming hills, Caleb said quietly, "I love you, you know." It was the first time he'd said it. They danced around the words for months, shown it in actions, but never spoken it aloud. Clara turned to look at him, saw the vulnerability in his expression, and felt her heart swell. "I know," she said. "I love you too. Even though I bought you like cattle? You didn't buy me. You gave me an option when I had none. There's a difference." "Is there?" "Yeah, because I chose to stay. Every day since then I've chosen to stay. That's not being bought, that's partnership." Caleb pulled her close, and they sat together as darkness fell. Two survivors who'd found each other in the wreckage and built something beautiful from the ruins. Red Hollow would never be perfect. Hutchins' trial would take years. Some debts couldn't be repaid, some wounds couldn't heal. Claire would always be the outsider who'd disrupted everything, and some people would always resent her for it. But she'd survived. More than survived. She'd thrived. She'd taken everything they'd thrown at her and turned it into strength. She'd endured the frontier and then conquered it, not by becoming what they wanted, but by refusing to be anything other than herself. And in the end, that was enough. More than enough. It was everything.